Well, hello and good morning, everyone, and welcome to Improvement in TDM Inclusion and Understanding. Y'all are right in this conference room we want to be in. Well, it is a treat to, you're going to be really, there's some TDM players here that are going to give us a real interesting presentation. I kind of like planning and setting your goals and starting your programs and evaluating live in real time with software, and then actually case results and how well they've worked. So, some pretty interesting presentations here today. My name is Raine. I'm the mobility manager for the city of Lone Tree. Managing on-demand freight transit system for the city of Lone Tree on demand and leading an advancing Lincoln Avenue corridor solution. TDM always comes up as an important goal for reducing auditors and getting everyone to use great buses to hit the rail. Let me introduce our speaker. All the way to my left, we have Audrey DeBarros, and she's the executive director of Commuting Solutions. She keeps the wheels of Commuting Solutions and Northwest Metro region rolling smoothly. She leads advocacy efforts, financial planning, coalition building, and everything in between, managing internal functions of the organization, but also the external voice. She's focused on expanding partnerships, coalition, and membership base to improve the regional transportation system. For today and the future, Audrey wants to make sure the region is proud to live and work. Connor couldn't make it here today, so Mr. Andy Keeton is here today. He is the head of Insights Communify, where he works in organizations across the TDM community to develop and improve technologies that solve real-world problems. He is also heavily involved with the Association of Commuter Transportation Act, where he sits on their board of directors, acts as their secretary for their employer council, and sits on their public policy committee. He received his TDM CP between certification in December 2020 and his spare time. You'll find passionately speaking about TDM as the host of Between the Lines podcast. Thanks for being available today, sir. And then Jeanne Shreve is right over here, and she joined Smart Commute in 2019 after a long career of planning and transportation. 11 years in New Jersey, something we have top in there, and 17 years for Adams County. She now enjoys partial retirement, volunteer work on special projects that feed her passions, including Smart Commute's Wagon Road, 144th Flex Ride, and Mobility Options Program. So lots of good information coming. Audrey, would you please?
Absolutely. Morning, everyone. Good to see you. Happy Friday. Woo, woo. My presentation today is going to be focusing on the supply side of transportation demand management. Oh, our company name got goodbye. Oh well. So much of our work in TDM is focused on, how people are moving with the existing infrastructure and land use that's out there. And so the purpose of my presentation is really to focus on the built environment and analyzing how jurisdictions can do a better job to be more inclusive of TDM. So in case you're not familiar with Commuting Solutions, we are a transportation management organization serving the Northwest Metro region of Denver. So the orange area is the service area that we take care of, working in close partnership with Boulder Transportation Connections and now Smart Commute on either side of us. And we're almost 25 years old. That's crazy. I haven't been here the whole time. How many? Yeah. I'm a proud, our organization is a proud partner in the Dr. Cloud Way to Go TDM program. And I'm just really excited about that. And now we have 8 TMOs. We added the West Corridor, who's on the map, but not in my. So it's a really cool and effective TDM partnership with the Denver region. In partnership with CDOT, we are implementing a local land use and TDM toolkit for developer project. And so the purpose of the project is to support local governments in considering TDM as part of their land use and development codes, and making recommendations that could be more supportive of TDM and multimodal transportation in general. And then we're also preparing a developer TDM toolkit. So what we're learning through this process is that developers don't know a lot about what TDM is. And so the more that we can give our jurisdictional staff what they need, just an intro document to explain what TDM is and the benefits from a developer perspective. It's just another resource to help move the needle to make those opportunities possible. We are working in partnership with 9 jurisdictions in our area, so they're listed here. And we're grateful for the collaboration that we have with these communities on many levels. But this is a new endeavor for us to get in their handbag in terms of their existing codes. So we're in the kind of thick of this. We have not completed this project, just so you know. So you're getting sort of an indicator of where we will be going to wrap up this project. But right now we're in the data collection phase where we've gotten the codes for all the jurisdictions. We're reviewing them, meeting with local government staff, and evaluating what they have in place currently and how their codes could be modified to be more conducive to TDM. These are some of the findings that we have so far, and I won't run through all of these, but again, we're fortunate that local governments are very supportive of TDM in general, that they're very interested in partnering with us. Mixed use development obviously presents a good opportunity to be inclusive of TDM, recognizing that there is more interest in parking reductions to create that built environment that's more walkable and pedestrian oriented. What we're finding is that the suburban sprawl and the broad land use is really a barrier to moving this forward. And ideas like this are really going to take time to evolve over time. And that the pandemic and the lack of transit service is another barrier that we're indicating or we're experiencing as a reason to encourage TDM implementation. We really feel like our region is ripe for this opportunity and to reconsider building codes and development codes to be more inclusive of TDM, and that we really see the work that we're doing here as working with local government staff to improve recommendations going forward. I kind of ran through some of this. I'm trying to be quick here and respectful of my time. I do?
Yes.
What's that? Okay. These are a few of the lessons learning that we are experiencing as we're working with jurisdictional staff. I think what city staff is one thing, but working with city councils and bringing forward local government ordinances that councils will then approve, I think is sort of the next level of work that we hope to move into. We also need to create a toolkit that can provide broad recommendation and it isn't too restricted to a certain community, a certain set of circumstances. So our next steps are really to finalize this work, create a final report for the jurisdiction, create a toolkit for developers to be used in the future. So we'll be wrapping up this process in the next 2 to 3 months. And then we'll be considering moving forward with proposing language to the jurisdictional staff and we'll get people with them to hopefully plug and play. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To do witchcraft here?
Well, it depends on how quickly this connects. It could
Does
be
anyone have any questions for Audrey real quick while we're doing that?
Yes, sir. We're thinking about different. I'm in Vail, so I'm outside of Metro, so maybe I'll be a little different. You think being in a rural town thing or an urban environment, but we're coming up with the same issue too, kind of the parking issue and how that drives cost of development, especially when we've got affordable housing. And like the TDM programs that you're seeing up in kind of Boulder County, are they mostly prescriptive? Because we've seen 2 different approaches where one is you let the planning commission decide whether you let the developer come up with a TDM plan and have the planning commission, look at that and make a decision, or could you have a point system or some kind of, thing, if, you could provide like car share, cars, or some kind of portfolio of options, and then you get like a credit for it. What do you think of that?
That's a really good idea. We're not at that place in the process. We're still on the front end of, as I said, working with the jurisdictions, analyzing their codes and then bringing forth some recommendations for them. And then the next step will be the developer field kit. So if I could come back to you in a couple of months, I'd be happy to share our knowledge and what we're experiencing in general. And Catherine, and we work in our area too. This is brand new work. We, most of the TDM work that exists is really on the demand side, where we're trying to shift, commuting choices during the peak commute hours, working with primary employers, not so much on the supply side of the equation. And where it is on the supply side, it's hard working with developers. They just don't understand it. They don't, the longevity of having TDM be included through the building permit process and then carried over to the ownership. And if the building is sold, then that goes away. I mean, there's just a lot of institutionalizing of TDM in the built environment that I think is a challenge that we're trying to, work with our region and several jurisdictions to overcome together. So that we're working on this on the front end, which will be more successful long-term.
One more question.
Obviously, with 9 jurisdictions, we know across jurisdictional
Yeah.
policies complicated. Are you seeing a similar vein, or are they all different, like their land use and their permitting? Is it, you're gonna basically making it an overview
Yeah,
and recommendation? Because are you finding a lot of disparity amongst the
There's
jurisdictions?
more, the city of Boulder is in our area, so it's like, city of Boulder is so progressive when it comes to this stuff. We have TDM ordinances already in place, so they're like a model for all of us to be looking at. But the rest of the communities, I think, are around the same approach when it comes to parking and, other incentives to encourage TDM.
You just lost.
Pretty low level of.
So that's encouraging.
Yeah. A low bar to move up from, right?
All righty, Edgley, why don't you go ahead and share?
I'm good, thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Keeton with Commute5, we're a Boulder based commuter tech company. So you might have, you were here reading the bio about my colleague Connor. Unfortunately, I'm less dashing than him, but we're here. And I was planning on talking in another session just after this. You can join me there, but he couldn't make it today, so I'm going to step in here as well. So being a company, it's headquartered in Boulder, in downtown Boulder on Pearl Street. One of the things we've realized over time is we've worked with the city, with BTC, with other organizations in the area, is that, going to what Audrey was saying, there's sort of this broad spectrum of solutions that come forward from a diverse group of stakeholders. So if you think of an individual who's trying to commute into work, they're getting resources from their employer. They're getting resources, hopefully, from the building that they're commuting into. They're getting resources from the city and the TMA and the region. And the question for us has always been, how can we try to unify all of that into one space? Because what ends up happening is this information overload where folks just don't get the information they need, and they sort of pick and choose. So they may be going to this resource or this resource. So what we've been doing alongside the city of Boulder and their community vitality department, and also talking with BTC, is trying to find a way, and this is in development here still, to unify all of this. So what we built here, and this is, like I said, take it sort of with a grain of salt, because it's still in kind of a development phase, and we're looking for feedback as well. But what we've put together here with them is a way to centralize all this information for individuals, without really having to do anything except just kind of know where you are going to. So I'm just going to kind of walk through this. I think it's nicer to see it sort of live than in a slide deck. So bear with me if there's something that goes wrong. It should be fine. What we're able to do is put together, this is this high level, at the city level, what's available to you. What you're seeing in this map is that there's multiple different districts within the city. So particularly with the city of Boulder, employees who are commuting into, let's say, downtown Boulder, they actually have access to different programs than if they're commuting into other districts like Boulder Junction, University Hill, and others. So what we're looking to do is sort of build that all into one view. You're able to see the programs that are available to you, as well as providers in the area that you can take advantage of. But what you can do is start to drill down into that. So I can look at, let's look at, the Atiyeh, which is the downtown area. I can drill into just that area and start to see not only, as we see now, the information that was here before, but now I also see this free eco pass, because for me, as an employee in the Atiyeh region, I actually get access to a free eco pass. So we can start to build these things and layer them on top of each other. But what's nice is sort of adding that next layer. So these buildings here, we've been working with the property managers to figure out what is it that you offer to your tenants that maybe, isn't offered at the building next door. And this is where going to something on the question that you asked earlier, even if you're, requiring buildings to do something, they're all going to do something a little different. So if we dive into one, maybe I'll pick Pearl West here. Not only can we then start to see what are those amenities available to me and the location of that building, but if we actually go in, we're going to see a specific page built just for that building that I can take advantage of, maybe just as a commuter going into that building, or maybe as a potential tenant who's considering where should I move my office location. So this is an opportunity then to learn more about what's available to me. But once again, all of these things are sort of layering on top of each other. So this building they're lucky or smart, and they're in the Atiyeh region, they get access to this free eco pass program. So they get anyone in that building, not just because it's that building, but because it's the region, gets access to that. But there's additional programs that are available to them just because of the fact that they're in this building. So we can start to build those on top of each other. We're also starting to think about, obviously location's important. So where are those, bike share locations near that building? Where are the bus stops near that building? So really trying to find a way to just present all of this information. And this is still even a level above than the employer within that building. So that level hasn't even been put into this yet. But the idea here is what we're really looking to do is figure out how can we take all of these disparate programs that are really working together and make it clear to commuters that they are working together and that you can take advantage of all of them. So this is, like I said, still in development, and we're exploring how to make this better and more intuitive and obviously up to date, because some of this information is, out of date as we go through it. But thank you. And I'm going to be done actually in a second so we can have questions. But what we're looking for is just more opportunities to explore how this might work in different jurisdictions. So thinking about, going from the city level or even broader to sort of the regional level, thinking about what Dr. Cog offers to everyone in the area, and just making that clear on what you can do without having to do anything, not having to make an account or do anything like that. It's just an information hub for all the information in one place instead of on 5 different websites. So I'll stop there and happy to answer more questions, just keeping it pretty high level. But yeah, thanks again.
That's some pretty neat stuff there. Anyone have questions for Andy? Anyone else?
And did you say that you don't have to have an account or an app to be able to access that information? So it doesn't require that extra step. You just get the info.
Right. So what we're trying to do is think of it really as like a website that's just really dynamic. So it's hooked into a number of different, real-time sort of feeds. So you're getting where are those bus stops, where are those sites, without having to, make an account. Now, the next step would be if you're an individual who wants to then say, okay, this is great. I want to take advantage of this free eco pass. Well, how do we then centralize that free eco pass from the city of Boulder and the, I don't know, the parking subsidy from the employer in one place. And that, at that point, that starts to kind of be another conversation that comes, and integration with the various sort of systems that are in place. But this right now is supposed to be, I don't know anything. I'm starting from scratch. I don't want to do anything. I just want to see it all in one place.
So Andy, subsidized, so the employer has to pay for this service for the employees, or are you working with the city of Boulder and the Audrey's organization? How are you implementing?
So what we want to do with this website is really just sort of make it available to everyone as just a sort of free resource. But we are working with, at the city level, it's pretty easy. It's straightforward. There's only a few things that really you need to build in. So it's easy for us. When you start building in each individual building, that's what takes some time. So we're talking with the city of Boulder and with the Boulder Chamber and Downtown Boulder partnership as well to say, can we subsidize just, being able to get every single building. Honestly, it's sort of a separate thing from what Commutified normally does. But we sort of started developing this for a property and then realized that it had some potential to support the city. And we've been working with the city for quite a while. So we're exploring what that would do.
Sure.
Yeah, just real quick, Andy, I was impressed by you and your personal commitment to doing all this. One question I have for you that might be specific to your product, but then also to the rest of us is data collection and accuracy.
Yeah.
Any hints as far as, you're collecting a lot and you're layering a lot. How do you keep that accurate?
Pixie dust. I think that the key is keeping everyone in communication and in the same sort of ecosystem. So, some of it can be done in an automated fashion through technical APIs and things like that. But a lot of it is just keeping that line of communication. So that's definitely something we're needing to figure out more. When we work with, we'll work with just a specific property development and, provide our solution for them. That's easy. We talk to them on a, weekly, monthly, whatever it is, quarterly basis. We can keep that updated. This next one is certainly much more complicated because we're talking now, Boulder is relatively small. Maybe you're talking 50 developments, but if you were to look at this for Denver or, God forbid, New York City or something, then you start to get really complicated. So we're still thinking about how to keep that up to date. And a lot of it is just trying to collaborate. But our thesis here is if we can keep everyone in one place, then we're sort of keeping each other honest a bit, and we can make sure that data is up to date. But it is a good question.
Any other questions for Andy? All righty then. Now let's talk about smart kids. Let's know, like we're transit.
It's a very long title, because I come from government, and that's what we do. So, but yeah, I really wanted to focus on this particular project because as Audrey started off, she's really talking about the supply side, right? Where we come in the beginning and try to figure out how we can incorporate TDM in a fashion into local jurisdictions that has this balance between what our needs are in terms of our commuters as well as what our employers need. And so when you come over here to this particular project, this is the demand side of working with those local jurisdictions, working with those employers and saying, okay, here's what this particular employment center needs. So that's what I'm going to be really focusing on, is that other side of the supply side. And then of course, with Andy's project with that technological resource piece in the middle, hopefully the three of us will be able to kind of tie this panel discussion together at the end. So with that, what I'd like to do is kind of walk through the different elements of what this mobility project really looks like. And I'll just highlight them and we can go into questions at the very end. So I'll keep it really high level as well. So I'm going to start with this general overview. We did get a grant through the last tip cycle through Dr. Cog, a $2 million grant to provide this mobility project over at an employment center at 144th and I-25. It includes a very large Amazon distribution center. It includes St. Anthony North Health Campus, as well as a lot of retail. And so there was quite an interesting mix of development, which I'll get into here in just a little bit. But we really wanted to take a look at shift work, because particularly with hospitals and the Amazon distribution center, they both have this structure of shift works that seemed to be very complementary in terms of the times that they started and ended. And so that was one of the things that we really focused on was, what times do people need to get to work and to end work? And then what kind of community solutions do make the most sense? So the first thing that we wanted to do was to provide a shuttle that would start from the Wagon Road Park and Ride down in 120th and Huron Street. So folks that were coming up from Denver or other parts of the metro area would access it to get to the employment center. So that really is the primary mode of transportation. And then we had a suite of other commute options, or mobility options rather, that kind of complement. So with that, this is kind of the program that we structured and have been in. We're in year 4 of this. So we have the shuttle that I just mentioned. It had a transit pass component, which we actually partnered a lot with Atiyeh on. They did a challenge grant. They said, well, if you can go out and get X amount of transit passes, we'll go ahead and throw in another $75,000. So that was a lot of fun during COVID. But the one thing during COVID, which was interesting for our project, was because we had shift workers that were both in the healthcare industry as well as providing essential needs, and that's the Amazon distribution center there. Our ridership actually increased. It was the highest during COVID because we needed to get people in line. And so when you see this graph here, you can see that during that COVID period about how that was our highest ridership. So, so it's kind of a plus and minus in terms of COVID. But for that particular reason, COVID helped our ridership. We also had an e-bike program that I will talk a little bit about. We were successful in getting a grant very similar to what Vail did through the Colorado Energy Office, so I'll go through that in a second. And then, we have kind of the traditional things like the doc probably car sharing and dance and things like that. And I'll also highlight and do the free ride program that we did during COVID as well. So, for the show highlights, this particular map, I'm going to come back to this map here in a second, shows our service area and the intersection of the employment center up at 144th and 925. And so this is our service area. It's very small, very concentrated, but it allows us to have a hybrid bus route system. So we have peak hour 20-minute headways during the AM and the PM, and then on-demand service during the time frame from about 9 a.m. to about 4:30 in the afternoon. So we really wanted this hybrid piece so we could concentrate on those shift workers when they needed to get to work, as well as when they needed to get off work. And one of the beauties of the program that we really wanted to emphasize and work on with RTD was the ability to tweak this schedule to meet the changing demands of that shift labor. Because Amazon, depending on what time of the year, as well as St. Anthony North, surprisingly, they had to do some shifts. So if they'd shift 15 minutes this way or that way, we wanted to make sure that schedule shifted with them. And so we worked out in cooperation with RTD, not a change in schedule, like their traditional service planning, service changes, but a tweak. So when we did a tweak, it wasn't something where it had to go necessarily, and this might end up sounding not publicly transparent, but stick with me here for a second. But it was a tweak enough for us to be able to shift that schedule so it met the needs and the demands of the people that we were serving. And that has been really important to us. We've had 8 tweaks since the start of the shuttle, so we could adjust and make sure that we met the needs of this particular workforce up at this intersection. This is the ridership. If you look at the very middle, the top graph, it's at 1,692. That was during COVID. And so, as you can kind of see, this is ridership data through June of this year. We've hit over 41,000 riders since September. So I'll be really interested to kind of see what our numbers look like through the rest of the program through September of next year. But, the majority of our ridership is going to be to Amazon as well as St. Anthony North. But we have a lot of internal trips as well. So a lot of that development that's going on is being supported because of those very large employers, which would be expected. And during COVID even, obviously that dropped, but we're starting to see that just kind of internal circulation continuing to rise and come back up. So the whole entire area is starting to be supported, as well as the fact that we have a lot of residential communities that are continuing to pop up in that area, and we're starting to see a lot more of that internal connections between those communities and the retail development that's in the area. Now, the Uber Free Ride program was a program that we partnered with the Denver Regional Mobility Access Council, or Dr. Matt, and that was to provide Uber free rides to anyone who needed it during COVID. We distributed about $22,000 worth of Uber free rides, not just to this interchange, but throughout the entire region. Anyone who needed to have a ride and needed to have that access to somewhere in the region, we provided that coupon. And it was very successful in terms of providing yet another mobility option in a time that accessibility was so limited during COVID. Now, with the e-bike program that I just alluded to a little bit ago, along with Vail and 6 other jurisdictions throughout the state, Smart Commute was awarded a grant through the Colorado Energy Office to provide an e-bike program for low-income residents in both Adams and Broomfield counties. We deployed our first round of e-bikes last year. I'm in the advertisement period right now to deploy the second round of e-bikes this fall, in winter, and then we'll have another one in the springtime. So that's been a very rewarding project. We've been able to also refer to participants to other programs that they need, such as housing or food distribution, things like that. And so it's been a very holistic type of a program that we've been able to really embark on. We've had some great partnerships with both Adams County and Broomfield agencies, and looking forward to this next round of e-bikes that comes out. So these are just some e-bike ridership data. The National Renewable Energy Lab is actually the administrator of a smartphone app where all e-bike participants throughout the state are collecting this data for the Colorado Energy Office to use and be able to see how people's commutes are changing and how they're using the e-bike. So I thought I'd just throw this up here so you can just look at that. And then the key lessons learned, kind of going back to the start of this presentation, I'm going to start at bottom in terms of the hands-on customer service and how that's essential. Particularly with the e-bike program, it was very, very important to be able to meet people where they're at, as well as with our shift workers. So if you had to have a transportation fare for employers, or excuse me, for the employees over at Amazon, and they work the night shift, we did transportation fares from 11 to 1 in the morning. So we went to where they were at. We go to where they need to be. So we didn't want to box them into just a general process. And that really, I think, became very essential because, for instance, if our shuttle was late getting into work, Amazon employees would get docked bags. And I said, all you need to do is tell me that you took the shuttle. I'll call HR. You won't get docked. It's been a fabulous partnership with both the private sector as well as our shuttle provider, that they all can trust that they won't be docked if it was because of the shuttle. It's why they were late for work. So we went down to that level of detail and that level of interaction with our customers as well. Technology wise, I put this on here because one of the things that we really wanted to work on in the grant was taking the FlexRide system in a suburban setting and trying to make them so that they could transfer a lot more efficiently. Had I known, even working in Adams County, that the FlexRide system at RTD is fairly antiquated, I guess is a good way to put it, and they don't really talk to each other. And I really never understood till I started this project how completely
Syncing together, yes.
it does not sync. And so we are working with RTD in the background to see if there's some way that we can test to make the FlexRide system talk to to each other a little bit better, and I can go into that if you're interested in that. And then I think for the planning and implementation, kind of coming full circle back to Audrey's presentation, I just want to go back to this map, because what has been really interesting about this project is figuring out where our bus could stop. Obviously, it's not ADA compliant. RTD is the one stop there. We can't even call them stops. They're called gathering points because it's not an ADA compliant stop with a sidewalk that connects. Then they technically aren't supposed to stop there. Okay, well, that makes sense. Well, what about when I get into a development? Well, it turns out when you go up into the northwest corner, which says the orchards, JCPenney's, the front stop in front of Nordstrom Rack, Target, they all have conditions that came out of creating that metro district in the city of Westminster. It says those two giant parking lots are private. Nordstrom Rack, nothing can stop in front of it. So imagine how difficult it is to figure out where you're going to have this bus stop, because at the beginning of the process, there were no entitlements that were given through through the development review process that said when you create this district, real transit accessibility means that bus can stop anywhere in that development. And so those are going back to the weaknesses that Audrey pointed out in her presentation. You know, those are some of the things as local jurisdictions in this TDM toolkit that Audrey's going to develop, that I'm sure is going to be in there, that this is one of the basic things you need to do, is to make sure that when you say you want transit accessibility from a policy perspective, that it actually is enabled in a district or in the development as a condition, because that's been very, very interesting. And another thing that we are actually testing as a part of our final report with this is what would be the travel savings if we would have put the gathering point here versus over here. If you were to go into a general Amazon parking lot, they put the bus stop right in the middle of the center of this giant parking lot. And it takes probably a minute and a half to get there. So one of the things that we are, and that's not during Christmas season, so one of the things that we are analyzing is if they would have put the spot at a different location that's closer to the arterial street system, what is that incremental time difference between those two spots? And then we're taking all of our shuttle runs throughout the entire duration of 4 years and saying, here's that incremental time saving that we would have received that would then translate into fuel cost savings as well as operational costs if we just would have said in the development review process, the stop needs to be here, not over here. So that's why I wanted to bring this up, because those are some of the things that we really want to get in terms of this demonstration project that we can then maybe feed back into the system in the future, saying as a lesson learned, think about where you truly what context sensitive design means is where does that transit stop really need to be? And it should also be thought of in terms of service savings, which is one of the things that we're going to test. So having said that, I'll end there. So we can open up the questions.
I love the police gathering point. I have my gathering point signs already made. I just need to place them. We're going to open up to questions, but I did want to steal a question from the right again. And that is your adaptability to the workforce gets impressive. Did they inform you? How's that relationship and notification evolve over the 8 times you've changed?
That's a really good point. So we have a very strong relationship with the HR department in Bree as well as St. Anthony North in particular. And so I reach out at least every other week to see how things are going. If we're looking to do another transition, I let them know ahead of time that I'm looking to do that. And that's because I'm monitoring all of the ridership data on a monthly basis. So this big long spreadsheet, 50,000 records, and we're analyzing where every stop is happening. So I can look at trends and say, I think we need to change this, or if I know, particularly during the Christmas season that's coming up, they're about to put on another shift, then I'll add another fixed route time point. So yeah, it's just this collaborative thing where I bug them all the time.
Your ability to have that interaction with HR and then let them know what folks is my least favorite word now, unprecedented. But it is really, that is outstanding customer service. And have you heard from your customers, those employees, how much it lessens their worry? I mean, let's face it, everyone worries about taking something other than their own car because there are cost savings or cost penalty. How has that been reflected in the service for when folks use the service?
Well, I was gonna actually put that up here. We have a lot of folks that have sent in emails and letters talking about how important it is for us to keep the service. I had a whole bunch of them send letters to the RTD board when we wanted Sunday service. We originally started off with service from Monday through Saturday.
The Chick-fil-A approach to transportation?
If it works. So yeah, they're always, I'm always on the bus. So during COVID, I was on the bus every week. So they would always have space to, but Jeanne's the one that would contact over our, they don't call it RT, but they call me. And I make sure something happens.
Question, Cheryl.
Jeanne, you need a Sierra or a Taylor,
Yeah,
I'm not
really.
sure, being able to infiltrate into our bureaucracy. Room, I call it, but, so we have an Amazon facility in St. Kitts. We have employees that are walking through fields because that first last mile, we can't get, when our TD Flex Ride services them, it's, they can't get there at 6 a.m., they have to be there at 3 a.m. So I'm curious, when you reached out to RTD for these so-called fleets, this is their RTD Flex Ride that you basically took over the management of? And did you subsidize that Flex Ride, or is this their existing subsidy?
No, this was a brand new service.
So so for the new service. And I would love that contact later.
Additional question?
I just wanted to mention, I don't know if there's any providers in the room, obviously, I don't think Christy's here, but this is a new model, I think, of providing service that should be paid attention to. And you can take some focus on a route that might be underperforming, and you can really take ownership over, that route and making these kind of adjustments that show how successful it can be in stimulating ridership. And this is something that transit agencies need to pay attention to. There might be a way to redeploy people into those kind of roles within a large transit. So I hope people pay attention to that lesson.
The great presentation. This is some of that final report. I'm interested in your final report, like your contact information. Question about the cost per ride on the Flex Ride shuttle versus the cost per ride on the Uber.
That's an interesting question. So for the Uber free ride, what was the biggest challenge during that period of time? Understanding what your question is. So because they had that kind of on-demand change and shift in price, it was interesting because when I would have a bunch of Amazon employees that would get off at the same time and they'd all call for an Uber, the price shot up, exponentially for all of them. So we had to work with Uber a little bit and say, can you kind of give us a little bit of a break, because the coupons are all $25 each. But I had people coming up from, I guess you could say, Arapahoe Road. A lot of people, and they use those coupons to get up there, and $25 didn't really cover what they needed. So it was a lot of work with Uber too, to try to get them to say, just, is there somewhere in the back end on the back end of your, I guess, program algorithm that you could just knock that off? And they did after a little while, about the time we were just about to end. But again, it's about coordinating with stakeholders and the providers, the service providers.
And Uber was full cost, they didn't get any type of subsidy or anything.
No.
Additional questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of maybe building off that too, were there operational savings from going to the demand response service model in the middle of the day versus fixed route during the morning and afternoon peaks?
I think we'll be able to answer that question more when I get to the end of the report. So, yeah, I think the efficiencies that I'm mostly concentrating on is again, that cost savings from where the stops are located. Because eventually at the end of the day, we want to figure out, well, where is the exact spot we actually want a bus stop? Turn it into a bus stop, because then it goes back to, well, if I don't have a sidewalk that goes all the way to where this ideal stop is, then that's one of the things that the jurisdictions need to work on to make sure we have ADA accessible and compliant access.
I mean, are you able to use fewer vehicles during the flex model versus?
Oh, yes.
During-
So
during
during
20
the
minutes.
on-demand, there's one shuttle that's used, during the peak hour, we have two shuttles. Yeah, to leave that 20-minute kind of thing.
Next question, I believe we can fit in. Gathering point locations. Did you run in public right of way versus private property? Were there different challenges with that? How was that all received?
So, so in the orchards that I was highlighting, as well as Den 3, that those were challenging points, because I originally didn't want to go into the middle of the Amazon parking lot. But they said, no, that's where the stop is, and you need to go there. We'll try it. So we're working on that, and then plus there's stops also where the kissing ride is, all those Uber cars. I mean, it's truly a multimodal hub, but it's in the middle of a parking lot. It makes no sense. So that's where the biggest challenges were, in those very large parking lots. And then again, like I mentioned, with the orchards, as well as the other commercial developments, because of the restrictions of where this bus could stop, it really limited where we could go. Plus, some of those developments have very narrow streets that a flex ride bus just simply can't safely maneuver down. And that was another issue, particularly trying to get to the residential communities. How do we get there safely? Pick people up and come out, or do we make them walk? So we're still trying that.
Challenges session of the 2022 annual TDM conference. I'm the moderator for this session. My name is Hurst. I'm the Freight Mobility and Safety Branch Manager here at CDOT. So let's go ahead and dive in. We're glad you joined us today. During the session, we'll hear about an engaging conversation regarding the time of agility and change, how we are adjusting to the future needs of consumers and coming out of a public health pandemic that changed today. You're hearing from two influential speakers that will bring to light two important topics: how to look at the future of freight or goods movement considering the increase in consumer demands, and how our consumer behavior is changing the way we think and travel. Think about travel demands as a result of public health pandemic conversion to an endemic. The format of the session is we will let each speaker provide their presentation, and we will conclude with a healthy amount of time for your questions and answers. Please write down your questions as they come to you so we don't miss the chance to hear them after the speakers are completed. To begin the conversation, let me introduce Erica Denny. Erica is the second generation trucker working for Denny Transportation as the Director of Sales and Marketing. She has taken an influential and active role in various industry associations and programs, including the CDOT Freight Advisory Council. Her passions include promoting the industry to open the doors to those who may not understand how it can be an incredibly satisfying career keeping the country's economy moving forward. She will present on strategies with essential workers and the generational gap. Within the trucking industry, not only is there a shortage of drivers, but a large shortage of young drivers as well as office personnel supporting these drivers. Conversations will be to discuss pathways and new ideas on how we get to the next generation into the industry. Welcome.
Hope it's okay. I don't like presenting sitting. Kind weirds me out. It makes it a little too informal. So I'm gonna awkwardly stand in the corner. I hope that's all right with you guys. If I'm blocking anything, please let me know.
I will awkwardly try to put the.
And I'm gonna point at him, and he's gonna flip the slides for me. So it's how this is gonna go. So as Craig said, my name is Erica Denny. I'm with Denny Transport. My father started our company back in 1992 as a brokerage, bought his first truck in 1994. So we're just shy of 30 years in business, being an asset-based carrier. We do refrigerated transportation, both truckload and what's called LTL, which is less than truckload. AKA in the refrigerated space, we just like to make it as painful as possible on ourselves because it's about as complicated as it gets. So we do long haul, over the road, the lower 48, we're all over the country. Normally my kind of plug for those that aren't into trucking and don't understand supply chain, we haul every cake pop to every Starbucks across the country. So if you like paying $4 for a bite of cake on a stick, welcome. So anyway, I am here to speak on the essential workers and the generational gap. Naturally, given my background, I'm going to take the essential worker track of transportation and trucking just because that's my expertise. So I'm not one to speak on things that I don't know well enough about without a ton of research. So we're going to stick into the trucking space for this particular conversation. As you guys all know, COVID was really a challenge. A lot of people stayed home. A lot of people still work remotely. A lot of people are, very sensitive to certain different things. Unfortunately, we couldn't stop. We never did. Our drivers never stopped. We kept going to the office. We made sure everybody was safe, but we had to keep moving because if we didn't, you didn't have your cake pops. You didn't have, your canned goods. You didn't have your anything, right? You couldn't purchase anything. The skyrocketing of online purchasing. Okay, it shows up for 2 days, but that comes on a truck. Everything in this office comes on a truck. So we never stopped, and call me an eternal optimist, but I always try and find something positive, even in the darkest of times. COVID was a dark time. But from a PR standpoint, from an educational standpoint of the general public, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to us. People understand why we're on the road, what we're doing. We're not an eyesore causing congestion, polluting the air. We are bringing goods, keeping the economy moving, right? Economy stops, we don't live the way that we did. Everybody's used to it, they just take it for granted. That could have been bad if we had stopped. So, next. Just a bit of a quick infographic. This is a little bit dated back in 2017, but this kind of gives you an idea of just how much freight in this country moves via truck. Naturally, we have rail, we have air, we have different forms of transportation, pipeline, etc. But this blue, even if you can't read over there, the dark blue is trucking, right? Pretty much every last mile, anything comes on a truck to some varying degree. Different sizes, different shapes, but a truck nonetheless. So again, we're here to stay. There may be some manipulation about what we do in the future as far as what we're driving, but we're going to be around. More so for the Colorado level, right? I look at the macro and I also look at the state level. I think that's a critical piece to be able to look at. As far as employment within these different transportation sectors, you can see trucking is a pretty big deal, right? Much smaller than a lot of our counterparts who equally important, but not as large of an employment factor. Obviously, wholesale trades, you got warehousing and all of that such. That's a big support for what we're doing. We go pick up, we deliver, et cetera. We need those people in as well. So that's also a huge demographic for us. Value of goods moves. Some people like to look at things in dollars. Some people like to look at things in weight, right? So on the left-hand side, you can see in billions how much trucking, rail, etc. moved in 2015. Again, it's a little bit dated, but you get the point. It hasn't changed that drastically. On the right, you can see the tons. So in trucking alone, 2015, $209.8 billion, 75% of all freight moved in Colorado was via truck. That comes out to 204.1 million tons, 77% of all freight was via truck. Again, just making a point, kind of a big deal, right? Next slide. Now for what I think a lot of us in this room are very, very intimately aware of. I know being born and raised in Colorado, I'm one of the few natives left. And I say that at a random bar and people look at me like, you exist? Really? That's a thing? Yeah, believe it or not, there's not just a cow town full of 20 people 30 years ago. It's a very different market, very different world, very different city. I still love it. I still adore it. But we all know what the traffic has done. And, we're doing everything we can within CDOT, within all the different things of expanding and making things better via transit, et cetera. But congestion is still here. That is something that we're all in agreement on that we need to try and help fix. How we do it, there's a lot of different avenues, but I will say it's a huge issue for us, not even just in the state, but nationally. So American Transportation Research Institute, ATRI for short, is a research program funded by those of us in the industry to go out and find what are your top issues as an industry each and every year. What are the top 10? And we look at it from a operational perspective, so those of us that own the companies who are in the office trying to run it, and from a driver perspective. And a lot of it is relatively similar. Some things are different from what's more important to drivers, but what is always consistent on both sides of the aisle is congestion. Bottlenecks. That's such a challenge because we're an industry that, believe it or not, we make 3 to 4% margin, maybe, if we're doing well. Very, very low margin, very, very high cost, very high risk. And any moment where we're sitting idle in a congested area is money lost in our pocket. So we are all for trying to change things. However, the things that we're up against are drivers, at least in Colorado. My drivers for Denny Transport, they know how to maneuver the state. They know when the peak hours are, when the slow hours are, how to manage I-70 through the mountains, what happens if they'll pass closes, what to do, how to work it. Those out-of-staters don't necessarily understand that. The other piece is we have to go with what our customers say. If they say you have to pick up at 5 p.m., if we say no, they're going to give it to somebody else. Then we're having to find additional freight elsewhere in a panic, trying to keep our drivers moving. We don't keep our drivers moving, we lose our drivers. Driver shortage is a huge issue. I'm sure you guys have seen in the news well enough. I don't need to harp that subject. So we're also up against that. We're also against the receivers. Different receivers receive at different times. So we have shippers who are kind of our customers, we pick up freight, and receivers where we drop it off. So receiver example would be King Supers for Mike or Kroger. We have to go by what they give us in appointment times. Trust me, if we can avoid all peak hours, we would, but it's not necessarily possible. The other challenge is the hours of service rules. Safety is the number one thing in our industry. Number one, our safety department, I always say, is the most important department in our entire company. That's what keeps us safe. That's what keeps the motoring public safe, our drivers, everybody. Key. Hours of service is a big problem sometimes, just because you run out of time, you can't just pick up and move. You're on a 10-hour mandatory break. You can't say, oh, well, I'm 2 hours in, but congestion's gone down. I'm just going to start driving. It doesn't work that way. We don't have that flexibility. So there's a lot of pain points, challenges to why we have to be out when we are, right? I mean, a lot of the times we do manage to avoid when we can avoid. The other piece is tolls. People say all the time, just take you for something. Go around it. We don't want you up to go to Denver. Well, yeah, on it. It's probably the most expensive, if not the absolute, other than the mile-long bridge to get into New York City, the most expensive toll lane in the country. We've done a great job as an industry working with U470. Craig's been a big proponent for us to try and get off-peak hour discounts. But again, 3 to 4% margin. Unless we're getting paid to do it, it's kind of a risk. It's something we can't afford to have our drivers just go willy-nilly taking all the time. So just kind of opening up that perspective of what we're kind of up against as an industry. Kind of on the sexy terms, right? Trucking's not sexy. This is one of the things that's always brought up because it is sexy. Technology is sexy. That's what everybody wants to know about, right? Autonomous is huge. I will be the first to admit, as much as it scares me, it is in our future at some point down the line. Now, if you talk to an engineer, if there's engineers in here, please close your eyes. Don't be offended. They say within 5 to 10 years. I call BS. I'm sorry. We've got a lot of ground to cover first before we can get to that point. So everywhere you look, everybody has a slightly different version of 5 levels of autonomy. But if you know anything about the autonomous world, there are always 5 levels. What falls under each of those is slightly different depending on the interpretation. The way I kind of see it, level 1 is maybe the very, very baseline of autonomous. So most of your passenger vehicles, if you bought them within the last 10 or so years, probably have the little, car vehicle in your mirror, or you might have, if you're parking and you get too close and it yells at you, or various different things to try and help you just be more visual as to what's around you, right? We've got some of that in the trucks.
In some of the newer trucks, so all of our equipment is under 5 years old. We always buy the latest and greatest and keep up because so many different reasons. I'm not going to go into that can of worms, but our trucks will stop themselves if they need to. We have a system that detects what's in front, and if the driver's not pushing on the pedal enough to slow down, the truck will kick in and it will stop itself if need be. Now keep in mind, we have the latest and greatest and newest trucks. That's a very, very, very small percentage of what's on the road. So that's the latest and greatest of what you can get. We have a long way to go before you have a driver not in there. And in all honesty, what I look at with a driverless truck is an 80,000-pound rocket going down the interstate with pedestrians surrounding it. That scares me. Personal opinion, take it as you wish. Until every passenger car on the road is autonomous itself and it's all computers talking to each other, we will not see an autonomous truck. They have them out there. I was very fortunate in this last week to be at the American Trucking Association's Management Conference and Exhibition, just this last week in San Diego. The exhibition hall has every type of technology, every type of truck, every OEM, for the truck side, the trailer side, satellite tracking, TV, I mean, anything and everything you can think of, and then some. Every OEM has a version of an autonomous company that they're teamed with to try to work on, but none of them will go north of I-40. None of them will allow for anybody to not be sitting in the driver's seat ready to react at any point in time. We've got a long way to go. They can do certain things, they can maneuver certain lanes, and quite frankly, when you get off the interstate, it gets way too complicated. You're not going to get a computer to back into it. Again, we've got a ways to go. But not to say it's not going to happen at some point. Next slide. I am very fortunate in that all that I am active in, I've made a lot of friends within the industry. Warner Enterprise, if you've ever seen their trucks, they've always been blue. They've changed their trailers to white. They're one of the large, big boys, I call them, out of Omaha, Nebraska. Got great friends up in their C-suite that we trade all sorts of information all the time just to make sure that we're kind of in the same line, same path, same ideas for the future. They are one that has partnered with Kodiak, an autonomous trucking company, to try and see what it's like to have an autonomous truck. They still have the driver sitting in it, paying the driver to not drive a truck that I can't even get pricing from any of the autonomous truck producers. So that tells you something in itself. And they're trying to see how it works, what doesn't, etc. In talking to them, they are all for this convoying idea. Platooning, convoying, there's different terms for it. I'm in agreement in that I think this is our next step within trucking. And the idea of this is you have your front car, and it becomes kind of like a train, kind of like a freight train, literally on an interstate of just freight. You have the following trucks with autonomous capability to follow the front truck. So they're all together, they're connected without being physically connected, and that's going to be a way that we can try and be a little bit more efficient. But here's the challenge. 97% of all trucking companies are under 10 trucks. Let me say that again. 97% of all US-based trucking companies have less than 10 trucks. If this is half your fleet, how are you going to be able to manage to have them all in the same lane, same place, same time, all the time to make this work? How are you going to afford to pay drivers to sit and not drive when a truck is, I don't even want to guess how much money? How are you able to economically do that? And quite frankly, what we all know, any cost put on us comes down to the consumer. We know what inflation has done this past year. It would only be that much higher when our trucks are 3-4 times what they cost now. And we're close to $200,000 a truck right now. So just kind of put that in perspective, but it is another option. And the big boys like a Warner, a CRST, a US Express, et cetera, FedEx, this could be a very genuine possibility if they can make it work. But again, majority of us don't have this capability at this time. In the future, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of exciting things coming. I'm very active in trying to recruit in new drivers as well as new students into the office. Who's going to be the future of the internal side of trucking? right? We go and recruit from supply chain universities all the time, and we get them an expense paid trip to Atiyeh's management conference that I just came back from. And our idea is, I look around my office and they're all closer to retirement than they are my age. What happens if we don't bring in young, fresh blood to then train and share that knowledge of the past 50 plus years, and then take the technology side that they're so savvy about and apply it to what we're doing and make this industry that much stronger? How do we do that? Well, unfortunately, trucking isn't talked about even in supply chain programs. You might get a week in a 4-year program. So by opening up that door and having the conversations with students, love it. I've already had 4 of 18 reach out immediately after returning last week saying, I am so glad I came. I am going into this industry. This is critical. This is a big deal. This is fun. That to me is a huge win. Drivers, we're trying to work all sorts of angles within the federal side of things. They passed within the infrastructure bill, the Drive Safe Act, which allows for those at 18 years old to have an extensive training program to be able to cross state lines. Believe it or not, right now, including in the state of Colorado, if you're 18 years old, you can drive a truck, but you can't go into Nebraska. You can drive from Sterling, Colorado to Durango, but you can't go from Sterling, Colorado to Ogallala. That's crazy, right? So by trying to open up that door and be able to tap into those who are leaving high school, who don't necessarily want to go off into college, that opens up a whole new level that we can try and tap into, because as I said, autonomous is coming, but we gotta wait. And the more people talk about autonomous thinking that it's gonna be in 5 years, the fewer people want to come in, because then a computer's taking my job. Why would I do that? Off the brakes. You gotta walk. Please come in. It pays well. It's great. The other kind of sexy topic is the electric truck. You know, we're trying to move as a country into a greener space, right? I'm all for that. Trust me, our entire industry is all for that. The challenge is, I can speak personally, my company paid for in full an electric truck 4 years ago. We still don't have it. So as fun as it sounds to have these trucks driving around, no emission, if you can't get them, it's hard to do your job. So we have a ways with that. Infrastructure is also the other piece that we have to make sure that we're going after. But again, that's another area that there's a lot of room to grow and a lot of ways that we can kind of improve ourselves. So with that.
Thank you.
Can you do me a favor?
All right, let's go ahead and shift gears. Next, let me introduce your second speaker, Thom Cerny. Thom specializes in behavior change with an emphasis on travel choices. Currently serves as AECOM's travel demand management practice leader. With over 32 years professional experience, he has become recognized as a leader in this field. He managed a number of high-profile travel behavioral change programs at multiple government levels and in the private and nonprofit sectors, and continues to work to integrate behavioral influences and travel impacts into multiple modes of travel models. He will present on current challenges in TDM. A lot has changed and continues to evolve as the world emerges from the pandemic. Our TDM organizations adjusting appropriately to meet these new challenges. Welcome, Thom.
I always cringe when I hear that, because our communications and PR people got a hold of that. Who's that guy? You're stuck with me. So again, 32 years in the business, and I appreciate a lot of the blunt statements you were making there about what's really happening out there. And I will also share some of my blunt assessments of what's going on within TDM. To give you a little bit of where this bluntness is coming from, AECOM is the largest provider of TDM services in the world. Just very, very few people know that, because we do these services on behalf of our clients. So for instance, if you're in Connecticut and you're standing on a rail line, a platform, and your train is 30 seconds late, and you want to know where the heck your train is, and you call in, or you're live chatting, you are live chatting or calling an AECOM employee. If you're in Pennsylvania and you want to know more about Pennsylvania commuter services, you will be working with an AECOM employee. These are contracts that have been won through DOTs, large regional agencies, etc. Today, I actually flew in, last night I flew in from Atlanta, the land of cars, where we operate something called, or play a large role in something called Georgia Commute Options. So what I'm going to share with you here is built off of real world to this moment activities of operating programs and all of the large blue dots. Those are current programs that we are managing right now. We have about 85 people here in the United States alone that specialize in this. The smaller blue dots are smaller projects that are currently underway. And the other ones are stuff that, we've dabbled in over the years. It's been quite a while since we've done work in Colorado. So based on, and to prepare for this presentation, I actually got on the horn with all of our outreach staff in each of these projects and said, all right, folks, tell it to me straight, take off the filter, what's happening out there. And a lot of what I'm about to share with you is based on what I was hearing from those folks. So next slide. All right, so what I'll do first is just kind of go through what's happening and some of the big issues that are facing us. First one, of course, is the work from home. It appears to be stabilizing. And I would caution you all when you look at the statistics associated with this, when you see a report that comes out that says people are returning to the office or people are staying home, dig a little bit and find out what the source is. What we'll find is that studies funded by property managers often skew a little bit more towards people are coming back. Those that are more technology oriented skew a little bit more towards going home. This one is from the most recent study out of Stanford, which seems to suggest 25 to 30% of any day of all workers, holistically, all workers, including truckers, 25 to 30% of them are working from home on any given day, right? That could be good news, but there's some bad news. There's also information that seems to be leaking out now that these people who are working from home, at least in a hybrid or full-time effort, are much more comfortable with longer commutes. I think we've seen some evidence of people moving out of the cities and now we're going to drive, if they only have to drive in 2 days a week, well, they're willing to drive much more distance. And then this one actually is surprising me. And again, this is when we get into questions and answers. Let me know what you all think. But it said they're saying that the current trend by at least large firms is to have everybody come in on the same day. It may only be 2 days a week, 1 day a week, or 3 days a week, whatever, but everybody in on the same day, which is a little surprising to me. And that's evolving. That's changing from what was originally happening, where it was more like on a fly kind of thing. Next slide. Transit ridership. And based on the latest stuff, this is stuff I was able to find within the last month. So who knows where it is today, but it again appears to be leveling off at somewhere around 70% of pre-pandemic ridership. And we need to have some really serious conversations about what is the future of transit. Will it ever get back to what it once was? I'm not that some folks out there, are using the term death spiral of transit. People are just not coming back, and without that revenue, it's getting worse and worse. And there's some information that supports that. Safety concerns are growing and significant in a lot of major areas. Bus driver shortage. Here's one comment. We would all, if we want to make a short-term impact on trip reduction, we all need to get up right now, leave, and go become bus drivers. I mean, we can sit here and talk about it all day, but honestly, if we wanted to make a true difference, we'd be driving buses right now. But we have to recognize that it's becoming much more difficult to promote transit to a choice rider. It appears in large part, and then there's micro differences, in different areas. But in large part, the choice riders have left. That the quality of the service that they're getting from transit agencies out there just is not enough to keep them using it. Particularly damaging some of these express buses and rail systems that are out there. And again, backing that up, Atiyeh, 71% of the 117 agencies that responded to one of their surveys had how to reduce service. That's bad. And that's something that's a real concern. Next slide. Employers. So as they emerged from their cocoons and started asking, about, when we started talking to them, is if they're willing to let us come in and talk to them. They've all pretty much figured out the telework element kind of on their own. I mean, sure, some wanted some help with policies and things like that, but for the most part, they don't need any help anymore. What seems to be drawing interest in TDM is the ESG and sustainability efforts of these employers. Now, and this is also being driven by investors. I know our firm, Thom, is very heavily investing in these type of things because our investors expect that from a large worldwide firm. And that seems to be the case with other large firms that I have the opportunity to work with. The trick is a lot of those decisions are done on the big global levels, and it's very difficult for a local TDM organization to get in there and do that. But I would say that at least our outreach staff are being more warmly received by the sustainability departments today than other groups within these employers. When it comes to blue collar and entry levels, it's all about filling those open positions. They're finding it incredibly difficult to keep good quality employees. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Already shared how the trend seems to be having everybody come in on the same days. And even though I've been in the business for 32 years, and I bet there's a lot of you who've been doing this for a while, employers still don't know what they don't know. It was a comment that Eric mentioned, and it's so true that there's been so much turnover in HR departments, so much turnover in employees. They're still not making the connection that we all see as something that should be obvious, that the commute is tied into their ability to retain and attract the best employees, but it's still a constant problem. The good news, I suppose, is that we all know there's a lot of new funding coming, and a lot of this can be, depending on how well you can schmooze it, I suppose. A lot of this could be available for TDM type initiatives. A lot of this is going to go into construction, but that could help TDM programs too, right? So what does this all mean? This is where you get my opinions here. It's a huge wake-up call. It certainly was for us and for our clients when the realization that transit wasn't going to come back as much. Well, why are we spending marketing dollars on this? Should we hold off on that? How about this one? Our TDM programs even in the right places. We, as an industry, have been so focused on downtowns, office parks, that type of thing. The congestion is kind of taking care of itself there. I mean, if we're real honest with ourselves, telework has healed a lot of the congestion and parking jams that we were facing. Well, it might need to be moving to a different area, and I'll talk about that in a second. Like, do we even have the right employees or properly trained employees to do the work that's so desperately needed now? The biggest demand on our teams is in what we call the collar communities. Those are the surrounding communities outside the urban areas, where the Amazons have got their huge warehouses, where there's food processing locations, where things are manufactured, because there's basically no transit service out there at all, and they're having trouble getting employees and retaining employees. Guys, how many of you or how many of your employees have been at a chicken processing facility or have stood in a break room at an Amazon complex within the last month? Unfortunately, it's a small percentage, but that's where we're needed. Are we agile enough? I keep talking to companies, some very big ones that we all know, that their unofficial motto is build the plane while you're flying it. All right, just get the thing to take off. Just take off. Go, 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 go. We'll figure out how to turn once we get airborne. And that seat of the pants kind of mentality has led to a lot of success for a lot of big companies. And I would ask, are we as a TDM industry agile enough to adjust to that kind of thing? Do we build TDM programs as we're flying? And then can you measure our impact? This is a sore spot for me, but we just have not done a very good job of measuring and coming up with any type of national standard. I also serve on the executive committee of ACT and the treasurer, and we hope to launch an organization accreditation program, which would include a requirement to collect and report data in a standardized way. So look for that. Next slide. As I mentioned before, we'd all be better off if we just got out of here and learned how to drive the bus. Driver shortages are a huge issue. And anything else between kind of one thin line with truck drivers. But at least truck drivers aren't dealing with unruly passengers. And somebody just came up with a new bus design. Has anyone seen this where they build the driver into like a little fortified cocoon? I mean, it's just, what does this world come to that we have to fortify our drivers to make them feel safe enough to drive the bus for us? It's really pretty sad. But in this situation, we need to be honest with ourselves. Should we be spending the very limited marketing dollars that we have marketing transit right now to choice riders? We can help explain how to use buses and train and such better, maybe than we have been, for those who have to use it. But as far as trying to attract choice riders, maybe the money would be Better stand elsewhere. No, that's right. Should we be looking to go old school? In a lot of those collar communities, the only viable trip reduction option is carpooling. And yet, so many TDM programs around this country have basically ignored carpooling for the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years. Maybe old school will become cool again. I'm not just saying that because I'm one of the other people in this room, but I also have the opportunity, which is really neat. This is going to sound really cool. I can't tell you who I'm working with. I mean, because we have non-disclosure agreements, it sounds really cool. But we are working with three major employers globally on trip reduction efforts. And we're being pulled into this for ESG reasons because they're realizing that their employees commute and their trip driving during the day may be the single biggest thing they can do to meet ESG goals. So anyway, but they're recognizing that many of their facilities are located in areas where there are no other options other than carpooling. And what they're also sharing with us is that there's a large percentage of people who work at these places that are family members. I think there was some qualitative data that I picked up over the years that was the case, but they're telling us no, that in fact that's part of their recruitment strategy now is to bring in more family members because they will ride together and they're more reliable because you have to, you know, if your dad will get you out of bed if he needs you to come in and to work with them. So maybe that's, you know, that sets up nicely for carpooling. High gas prices are still perceived to be high. They've come down some, but still the perception is that we're spending a lot of money getting to and from work. The all-in hybrid approach, maybe that sets up nicely for carpooling too. So just something to consider. Maybe it's time to start getting back to the actual ride matching part of this. Now, I would say, I don't know really if we need to match people anymore. I don't know I'm old enough to where it was pins on a map when I first got into this business, literally pins on a map. And then going into handwritten rideshare applications that we would scramble back to the office and have data people just cramming it into the system and trying to turn around ride match lists within a week or something. Today, it's all you can do. You know, we just have people scanning at our tables and they find the list right there. But even so, we're finding that that may not even be needed. What we need is to focus on programs that support people who can already find their own person to share a record. Dam tools have got to change. Anybody in here heavily involved in dam tools? Okay, so you may know more about this than I do, but we've got to find just getting two people to share a ride is incredibly difficult. Finding larger groups is becoming more difficult. We've gone from, again, back in the day, kiddies, a van pool is a 15-passenger behemoth rolling down the road, filled up with 10, 11, 12 people. I'm a certified van pool driver, by the way. But today, they're now 7-passenger SUVs, right? So what a van pool is a little bit different. But even so, we've got to come up with a better way to do that, because I just think with all the variety of schedules and things, I know Enterprise is working on a dynamic van pooling system where you would like get a seat that day kind of thing, but I'm not an expert. Question about it. Oh, yes.
I was gonna ask, have you done any research in like the slugs that the Pentagon
Slugging?
had? Have you heard about that?
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say, if we could scale that, something that would be.
Anybody here in Transportation Research Board? Anybody know what that is? Okay. Okay. So it's this gigantic conference in Washington, D.C. at the worst time of the year. It's like in January, you're freezing your butt off. But anyways, last year it had something like 14,000, or last real year, something like 14 or 15,000 people at it. And it's where the academics of the world present their academically gathered information to the practitioners of the world. That's the concept, anyways. And I was privileged to review and to recommend the publication of the greatest TRB paper I've ever seen, The Mating Habit of Slugs, where they went into this incredible detail of how slugs are put together. Slug lines are basically carpoolers who are robbing people from the express bus lines in Washington, D.C. There's also one, the Bay Area in San Francisco has one as well. So who knows? I mean, I will say, based on that report and other experiences I've had, the last thing we want is government getting involved in slug lines. Just let it happen. If we start trying to regulate and organize,
Oh, for sure.
Next slide. As I mentioned before, IIJA is going to bring a lot of money into construction. And I believe, and I hope I don't offend anybody in here, that the vast majority of public involvement dollars that have been spent in the last 30 years have been a waste of money. I think when you start talking about public involvement being like a fancy website, we're going to hold a public hearing at a library. We're going to, we're going to go to back. This is what kids do. Back, let's set up the display in the mall. But the people who show up to those things are generally the advocates or people who don't have jobs or elderly, and see what or people who just want to get free stuff off of your table. What I think we should be doing as an industry is getting TDM much more proactively involved in road construction projects, to where in the example that I was involved with the Atlanta Braves when they moved from downtown out to the suburbs, and they moved this 30 or 40,000 person stadium to one of the 50 most congested interchanges in the entire nation. I was placed in charge of the circulator study and the circulation plan for this thing. And basically they said, well, we can't have any additional congestion, make it happen. So what we did is we actually put people on the street a year in advance of the first pitch, proactively going out to the largest employers. And we were focused on 31 days that there was going to be a home game during rush hour. It was all about let people work from home or leave early, go to the game, all that kind of stuff. And proactively going to them and listening to their concerns was far more effective. And we were upselling long-term, change and, how people got to work. We were already talking telework and things like that. So that was a great experience. It worked out very well. I'd love to take all the credit for that one, but the Braves actually sucked that year. So nobody was going after the first couple of games. No one was going. But when the Braves made a pennant run a few years later, people had figured out the system. Lyft drivers not obeying the rules if the word pick up. They went rogue at us. Okay. I got all kinds of stories. So again, ESG and sustainability seems to be the big opportunity for us with large corporations. Again, just you got to find the Goldilocks company. That's the one that's not too big, not too small. It's just right, meaning that it's got enough employees to make a difference, but it's small enough to be locally, or there's local decisions being made. So we'll find the Goldilocks. And my folks within our practice are telling me that congestion and parking is a non-issue now. I don't think that could be different where you all are, but our folks are like, nobody's even worried about parking shortages. We talked about the college communities. It's something to think about. Are we in the right place now? And do we have the right staff? It's a real different type of person. If you've got somebody who's comfortable going into a white collar, office complex to talk to employees about trip reduction, kind of transit pass sales, all that kind of stuff, that's a different kind of person than somebody who's going to stand in a chicken processing plant and talk to a group of people who may represent 8 different languages. How do you communicate? What is the selling point? How do you get that? How do you accomplish that? So just something to keep in mind. We need to be reaching all travelers. One of the things I just heard, and again, if there's probably people in here that are have more expertise than I do, our AECOM's telework specialist is actually presenting at this same time in the room. She's telling me that the latest stuff tells us that from a carbon reduction and carbon emission reduction standpoint, the current teleworking situation has done nothing. That there's so many additional trips being made during the day, longer commutes, non-transit trips and stuff like that, that it seems to be we're still killing our planet every bit as effectively. We're just doing it from home. Something else to consider is that this is often off the radar of TDM programs is school-related traffic. In many urban areas, this can contribute to 25% or more of the morning commute time related congestion and emissions. Because do this. Did you know? Here's a little gem for you. So how many of y'all have had kids and you had to get Susie or Johnny from school, so you got there 45 minutes early to be first in line, right? And in the school pickup thing. Research shows that if you show up at the exact moment, if you're the first person in the back of the line when the school actually opens up, the amount of time you will have spent is less than if you got there so early. Is that making sense? So there's really no reason to get, unless you gotta get, you know, Johnny or Susan to some dental appointment, you know, where you have to be there up in front. And the other awful part of this is so many, especially in the South, maybe here too in the summer, it's so dang hot that the parents are just sitting there idling with the air conditioning going, just polluting the worst possible air, those little lungs at work, sucking all of that down. Oh, just killing me. Anyways, that's fine. So final thoughts. You know, some of this could be kind of a downer, but I see it as opportunity. This is a fascinating time to be in the business. Again, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm more jacked up about it and the opportunities that are available to us today than I ever have been in the past, particularly, you know, if we can just get access to some of these additional funding things like that. TDM works. I wouldn't have been doing this for so long if I didn't believe that we were actually providing a true benefit to our communities and getting cars off the road, but we're horrible at tracking it. We really are. Until we come up with some type of agreed upon standards, we're always fighting an uphill battle. So help me fight that fight. Stay persistent with employers. There was a message that came through from our staff is like 90 more than, if you're making cold calls into employers, you're going to be told no somewhere in the range of 90 to 95% of the time, and we track all this. But what they will say is if you stay persistent within a year, a huge percentage of those will start to come back. When I say huge, you might get, you know, then like 30% of them will come to you. But still, don't hire people that get discouraged if they hear no a lot, because you're going to hear no a lot, even though it makes so much sense. They also emphasize the simpler the programs can be, the better. If you can't explain your emergency ride home program in 10 seconds or less, you're in trouble. If you can't explain what you do in 10 seconds or less, you're in trouble. My 32 years have led me to this moment to tell you what my elevators, when somebody asks me, what do you do? My response is, you know, if everybody complains about traffic congestion, it's my job to do something about it. It works great at holiday parties and such. People will give you an earful of how to fix everything. And it's a good open-ended question that I've used for a while. So, and then again, stay mobile, be flexible. Companies are building their TDM programs, they're building their products and stuff as they're flying them. So we need to look for ways to become as adaptable as possible. That's it. Hey.
All right, so we have a whopping 12 minutes to ask some good questions to keep us on track. And please ask questions, because if you don't, I'm going to.
But I had a question about kind of CDL, kind of the trend you're seeing. I mean, we see that on the transit side, right? You know, we have all this funding from kind of the COVID relief packages, but especially up in the mountain communities, like it's impossible to find drivers. You seeing that getting better, or I know they changed all the training qualifications now and make it like add another couple of weeks on that onboarding process. But can you see that in a year? Is it better or worse? Same?
Well, in the last year versus COVID years,
Well,
COVID years are a bit of an outlier because all CDL schools have to shut down. That pilgrims. Then you're sitting an entire year and a half of no new CDL drivers entering the industry, and a whole bunch leaving because of either retirement, COVID, they don't want to be out, they've got, you know, health concerns, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a huge impact for us. You know, it's still a challenge because it's not a sexy industry. And that's why I brought up the Drive Safe Act. I think that's probably our best bet for the future of getting those out of high school versus going somewhere else for 3 years before they can even get CDL. As far as for my company, we are having a better time finding drivers, but unfortunately, because of diesel prices, a lot of owner operators went under. So when you can't float 45 days of extreme price hikes, a lot of them went under. So whether it's a CDL increase or people just having to jump in and be an employee company driver versus being an owner operator, I don't know that off the top, to be honest. But we do have at least schools back open and functioning and pushing to get guys and gals in. There's also a very large women initiative. So we're taking a lot of approaches to try and make trucking more appealing and safer for women drivers. I'll be honest, of our entire fleet, I'm not saying it's because of bias to the woman, I'm saying it's because it's true. They can run circles around the guys. Their safety, they're detail oriented, the city manager, yeah, I mean,
Better
they
than
are phenomenal. I mean, one of our women, we tell her train guys how to throw chains. And she's like, this big. Those things are not light, all right? So, yeah, we're trying to find alternative ways. So, again, sorry, I don't know the specifics to that answer, but there's more than the last few years.
During COVID, it was interesting. Actually, Eric helped us work on this. My team started the first apprenticeship program for CDL in the state. And, you know, it's expanded. Quite honestly, 63 organizations are involved now. And we turned it over to the Adams County Workforce Development Center because a lot of CDL jobs originate in Adams County in Colorado, but obviously not exclusively. And that similar challenge is, you know, you want to get people who are, you know, trying to establish a career. Well, a lot of times for CDL bus drivers included, it's a transition career, right? They started as something else, and now they're moving into this. So you're catching, you know, someone in their second, and they may have bad habits. I know that sounds terrible, but in the trucking industry, bus as well, just CDL in general, you want to develop those habits early, and you want safety to be your number one priority. So finding ways to transition, you know, people right out of high school into some of these transportation jobs, no matter what they are. CDL. I mean, I started at the end of college as a forklift driver. You know, trying to stop being a bartender, you know. But then, you know, 7 years later, 330 people working for me at a big trucking company. So there's a lot of opportunity. It's just hard to communicate that, especially when you say, well, that opportunity really doesn't start until you're 21 or things like that. And the busing industry has that similar challenge as the general CDL traffic. Interesting piece to understand about truck drivers. If you have all of your endorsements, meaning you can run doubles, triples, hazmat, tanker, you have the same background check as a commercial airline pilot. So think about that. I mean, that's it's not necessarily easy. And then you look at a fellow my size who has a pretty large net. I have to have a heart check every year, and a sleep apnea test every year to maintain my CDL because I have a 19-inch neck. I've had a 19-inch neck since I was 13 years old. I mean, it's better to be healthy and have a big head, you know. So it is an interesting regulatory challenge to overcome as well. And then that's what you were saying. The training goes further. And someone from my position, I think that's necessary because we need to be safe. We need that to be our number one priority. And good training is the foundation to all of that. But then you have that kind of barrier to entry, if you will, for that job. It's a cost associated with that training on both sides. And so I think that's a challenge that all of us need to work on. I think you're absolutely right. If we wanted to have an impact, we'd stop and go drive a bus or something with air brakes, because that's usually the big challenge there. And I would say, you know, just kind of combining what you're both talking about, it's changing demand is probably the hardest. So changing attitudes from a business standpoint is super simple. Just got to change the demand of your customers, you know? And so it's like, we'll all adapt from a business standpoint to whatever our customers need. But if I'm trying to deliver fuel on the I-70 corridor, so the town was like, yeah, no, I'm not hiring a part-time employee to come in for an hour for a fuel drop. Or I'm not pulling a police officer off the road to come in for the fuel drop. It's changing their demand to allow us to deliver in the middle of the night. So we're not up on the I-70 corridor from 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. or 5 p.m. And so that is the big thing. If you look at companies that own their whole supply chain, McDonald's, Walmart, some of these bigger companies, you see them delivering in the middle of the night. That's because there's nobody else on the road. That's the most efficient time to be out there for them. That's the highest safety time to be out there for them. But that's because they're setting their own demand. And so when I'm trying to, in my old world, if I was trying to deliver to the mall, guess what? I'm right in the middle of traffic. They want that delivery between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. because that's when they have their after-school employees coming in. And then, you know, now I have to bring them back to Commerce City from Lone Tree, from the mall in Lone Tree, right? And so now you have this maximum congested route back home. and we're worried about the freight that they picked up because that needs to leave our facility that night. So there's a mutual benefit if we could fix that demand, but I think that's probably the thing that we're all talking about the most is that fixing demand and the way our economy demands kind of what we need on a day-to-day basis will have a fantastic impact, in my opinion, on congestion, because trucking only makes money when their wheels are turning, as Erica talked about. But if you want to get me in trouble, it will get me starting to talk about what toll lane should be changed to, and that should be a truck lane, because they would pollute 70% less too if they were going 55 to 60 miles an hour consistent. Stop and go traffic is what causes trucking in the base. So, yeah, sorry to interject my piece. I wasn't a speaker, but I do think that's, listening to both of you and listening to kind of the challenges but also the technology opportunities. I think that's part of our education piece is changing in our economy. As we kind of have, this next day, 2 day, same day delivery. I like the option of where they're delivering at the house after 10 p.m. I know that sounds wild, but they're not going to hit my daughters while they're out there on the bike. They're not going to be competing with school traffic or anything like that. And quite honestly, I know the delivery is coming, so I'll set my Ring doorbell to flag it and be happy with it. But I think that's just a difference that we all have to kind of societally change over. McDonald's is easy to pick on, but next you probably have rarely seen McDonald's delivering 2 McDonald's. That's because they deliver 3 in the morning. Because it makes sense. They own their own supply chain and they set their own demand model. So that's part of their process.
What's your question about say the example of Vail, they're not one store is not gonna kind of spend to come out at 2 a.m. I don't know if this would be a logistical nightmare, but is there a way to work, say the city of Vail to have someone all night that can go to different places, or city based staff or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how many fuel drops we're talking about, but larger facilities are taking 1 truck fuel drops, right? So you're taking the full 10,000 gallons. But absolutely, there's regional folks that do that for gas stations and things like that. That's what I mean. There are strategies. There are ways to fix these things. It was similar to Boulder trying to do trucks only at night. Look, that's a great thought process until you start getting down into the manpower that it takes to accept goods and things like that. Again, it's a demand thing. I think if there was more demand from the business owner side in the contract negotiation period, they'd probably find a solution for it. And so that's why I just think we need to refocus on the demand side of things, and we'll adapt to that from a business wise, whether it's government business or private business.
Do you have when your recruitment process, do you have challenges where a candidate is saying concerned about their personal fitness, or dynamics, anything like that? Is that part of the challenge maybe in recruiting?
Absolutely.
What do you tell them? How do you address that?
Well, first, our recruiters know that before we can even bring them in the door. Now, keep in mind, we're flying a lot of guys into town. So we're hiring guys not just from Colorado. We got drivers from all over the country. And in the initial conversations, we have to have their license, copy of their license. We have to have their physical. They have an annual physical that we appeal for CDL holders. He still has to do. You just talked about his neck size, right? He needs to go get that every single year. And that is a bit up for debate as to whether or not those regulations are stringent enough. When you think about a truck driver, probably not having the prettiest picture of, health and wellness come to your mind. There are levels to which, sleep apnea, if you can't sleep, we can't have you go on the truck, right? If you can't get in and out of the truck, we can't have you drive the truck. Do I personally think it could be a little bit stricter? Yes. But, we have had guys that they show up on site, and while everything passed, we're watching them walk around and it's with a limp or over or they have a cane or something visual. We have the right to have the conversation of, look, we have to make sure that you're safe and we don't feel as if you have the appropriate fitness level to be able to handle what it is that we need you to do. Or we'll even have them go and try and unload a trailer. Can you do that? And if they're struggling and they're stopping and they're having a hard time breathing, we have the right to let them go at Little State. That's one positive thing. It's a touchy subject, but
I would also say though, too, from a technology standpoint, blockchain is changing the way that trucking works. So LTL, what Erica was talking about, is kind of like Southwest, where they go location to location and consolidate. Blockchain allows for shorter trips, which means you go home every night, right? And so I worked in a company my first decade of my career where, unless it was a bad weather situation, you went home every night. And that's a huge selling point in the trucking industry, not being over the road long haul. And you can say, you still get to coach your kids. You still get to, participate in your children's life or, stay married. That's a challenge, And so I do think that's a big piece that the old school trucker, the pre-80s trucker, the kind of, taking greenies and driving across the country on 3 logbooks. We're still trying to shed that as an industry because that's not quite what the industry is anymore. More and more trucking models are going to the LTL model that she was talking about, where your drivers may drive from the LA port back to Colorado, and yeah, that's a 2-day trip, but then they get 2 days off. And it's more of a firefighter schedule than a old school, gone for 6 weeks, home for a week schedule. So I think that's a piece too, is always overcoming that old mentality of CDL drivers being, 350 pounds and look like they lived in a cave for the last 9 days, So it is a tough challenge in the recruiting sector to try to overcome that as well.
We're very excited to have you. We're going to just jump right into it because of time, and if we do run out of time for Q&A at the end, the organizers of the conference, as you may know, will be recording this, and they'll make this available as, I believe, a YouTube video link. Is that accurate? So you can all revisit the presentation, and then we'll have all of our contact information available, so you can reach out to any of these wonderful women, as well as myself, after the fact. So I'll start. Welcome again. My name is Amanda Mansfield. I'm the Executive Director of Boulder Transportation Connections, or BTC, love acronyms, and that is the TMA for the city of Boulder. I'm going to be moderating today, and here we have 3 wonderful speakers. We have Devin Edgley, the Policy Program Specialist from the Chamber, Boulder Chamber, which is also where I work. We integrated with the Chamber in 21. We have Atiyeh, who is the Board Administrator and Senior Program Manager of the Colorado Energy Office. And last but not least, we have Allison Moore-Farrell, who's the Senior Transportation Planner at the City of Boulder. So they're going to each go through their presentations. I'm going to pose a question to each of them. And if you do have questions, please hold on to them until the end. And again, if we run out of time, please do reach out to us after the fact. So this is the general panel topic. This is a really important issue because, as most of you know, I'm sure there's unprecedented amounts of federal and state funding available to support sustainable transportation, particularly EVs, and employer-based travel demand management programs. So we're going to be looking at how government entities, employers, and the broader community can access state and federal financial assistance to pursue, as I mentioned, employer-based TDM programs, purchasing electric vehicles, running e-bike rebate programs, that would be for a municipality, for instance, buying e-bikes through those subsidized programs, purchasing, installing, and maintaining EV chargers, accessing zero-emission fleet truck subsidies, the same thing for buses and for rideshare fleet. And finally, we'll be talking briefly about a piece of legislation that promotes zero-fare transit trips. Here are the panel questions. So I'm going to basically be asking Devin, from the business community perspective and the broader community perspective, what are some exciting opportunities on the horizon regarding those federal and state dollars that would provide funding for TDM programs at work sites, transit initiatives, and she'll also be talking about a really exciting and not very well understood safety related law that just recently passed. I'm going to ask Terry to talk to us about really, again, all that wonderful unprecedented amount of federal and state funding that currently is available to us, that community members can take advantage of to incentivize the purchase of EVs, buses, fleet vehicles and e-bikes, and charging infrastructure. And finally, Allison will tell us of some really great innovative things that the city of Boulder is doing to advance electric vehicle adoption using all of these funds. And then what are some EV advancement opportunities that other municipalities in the community can take advantage of? And I will move on to our first question. So Devin, again, from the business and community perspective, talk to us about some awesome opportunities.
Okay, is it okay if I just?
Yeah, please stand up.
Cool, this seems to be this. Okay, so the very first one, HB 22-1026, very important piece of legislation for employers and employees. This is a 50% off tax credit to employers for employee alternative transit options, up to 250,000 tax credit, $250,000 tax credit with a cap of $2,000 per employee. Some of these programs include van pool, carpool, transit tickets, provisions for e-bikes, shared micro-mobility company memberships such as e-bike and e-scooter share, and car share and guaranteed ride home. This program begins January 2023 and ends January 2025. And again, I just want to emphasize how important this is for employers to utilize for their employees. This is a great opportunity to offer alternate forms of transportation other than single occupancy vehicles for their employees. And then we'll go to SB 22-180, Program to Reduce Ozone Through Increased Transit. And this is a grant program through RTD to offer free rides for 30 days during high ozone season. And this grant money will be supplemented from 80% of RTD's costs for providing free rides during ozone season. So what that looks like is, since this is 30 days of free rides for people, 80% of the costs will be subsidized. 3-year pilot program to extend transit throughout the state for reducing ground level ozone emissions. This is $28 million to ozone transit programs, $30 million for state highway fund projects, $10 million Transportation Development Division for revitalizing Main Street programs. The Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, as it pertains to EV, to reduce our deficient and to promote domestic clean energy. Light duty EV tax credit up to $7,500 starting 2032. Again, I'm going to go through these, but I believe that Allison will actually go through these in more depth. This is how it's explained for vehicles, but I will get to the bottom where it does actually include e-bikes and 3-wheels. So light duty EV tax credit up to $7,500 starting 2032. Used EV tax credit up to $4,000 or 30% of the price of sale, less than $25,000 of the total cost, and at least 2 years old for a used vehicle. So this is also offering commercial EV credit up to 30% of sale price of vehicle. And as it pertains to e-bikes and 3-wheels, there is a code 30C tax credit, which is 30% capped at $30,000, provides businesses with e-charging stations and includes both 2-wheel and 3-wheel. And this piece of legislation is not about funding, but it is a piece of safety legislation that is very important for all of us to understand, the safety stop law. Bikes and other low-speed conveyances. This law applies to anyone over the age of 15. It applies to bikes, e-bikes, electric scooters. You must have the right of way going less than 10 miles an hour. You may go straight or turn right on red only after coming to a complete stop yielding pedestrians. Left turn only allowed on one way. So the most important piece of information as it regards to safety would be that this is the ability to treat a stop sign as a yield and treat a stop light as a stop sign. Okay, so now comes the call to action where I ask all of you to really just pay attention to these talking points and deliver all of this information back to your employees and employers. Reach out to Boulder Transportation Connections, BTC, to learn more about how your worksite can take advantage of HB 22-1026, very important legislation for 50% tax credit for every dollar spent to encourage sustainable commuting. Encourage your employees and coworkers to ride R2D at no cost during the Zero Fare for Better Air campaign month in summer 2023 and beyond. Reach out to BTC to learn more about how you can take advantage of EV and EVSE tax credits to ensure safety commuting travel for all modes. Educate your employees, coworkers, and community about the safety stop law rules of the road for bicycles. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Devin. And now we will move on to, here's Devin's information, but again, this will be featured at the end. We'll move on to Carrie. So Carrie, can you talk to us about federal and state policy programs that exist that community members can take advantage of to get EVs, no cost buses, fleet vehicles, e-bikes, and charging infrastructure?
So there's a lot happening at the state and federal levels. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. You will have these slides and access to the links that I'm referencing. So if you miss out on something during, we can talk about it afterwards, or you can refer to the slides after as well. So I wanted to start off with Senate Bill 21260. This is our Sustainable Transportation Electrification Enterprises. This legislation created 3 new enterprises in the state of Colorado to promote transportation electrification. One is the Community Access Enterprise. That is the enterprise that I serve as the board administrator for. That enterprise is housed within the Energy Office, and it's focused on supporting EV charging as well as hydrogen fueling infrastructure and adoption of EVs by low and moderate income Coloradans. The Clean Fleet Enterprise is housed within the Colorado Department of Public Health, and that is focused on fleet vehicles and the adoption of those vehicles to get them to switch over. And then the Clean Transit Enterprise is housed here at the Colorado Department of Transportation. As its name implies, it is focused on the transit system and associated charging infrastructure. So just a little bit more about Community Access Enterprise. Next slide, please. Community Access Enterprise is projected to have revenue of $310 million over 10 years. So these are significant resources of funding for transportation electrification in Colorado. We are utilizing those funds. All the enterprises had to develop strategic 10-year plans. So we have those 10-year plans available on each of the enterprise websites if you want to learn more about the funding and the programming. For Community Access Enterprise, funds are going into our existing Charge Ahead Colorado grant program for charging, our DC Fast Charging Plazas program, and also our Can Do Colorado Right program. We're also going to be launching new programs for the Community Access Enterprise. One program will be very much focused on community-focused projects to encourage sustainable transportation. We will be launching a new high-emitting vehicle replacement program in the state of Colorado. And then the Community Access Enterprise will also be launching an infrastructure program specifically for medium and heavy-duty vehicles. For any of you involved in the medium and heavy-duty space, with one point of clarification, Clean Fleet Enterprise at CPHE is offering the incentives for the vehicle. Community Access Enterprise is offering the incentives for the charging infrastructure. So you can stay up to date and learn more. There's a sign-up link to get information about the Access Enterprise on our website. The Clean Fleet Enterprise has projected revenue of $289 million over 10 years. It is outlined in their enterprise 10-year plan. They are focused on 5 primary program portfolios. You'll be, again, focusing on that electrification of complete vehicles and the associated technology, as well as transportation network companies, or TNCs. There's also a program for remote sensing. They will be dedicating resources to workforce development, and then also continuing planning, research, and evaluation. Next slide. The Clean Transit Enterprise, again, housed here at the Colorado Department of Transportation, has projected revenue of $134 million over 10 years. Their program areas are focused on planning, facility modifications, the vehicle acquisition for those transit vehicles as well as the charging to support those transit vehicles. And the website is there as well. In terms of our existing EV infrastructure programs that we have at the Colorado Energy Office, we have Charge Ahead Colorado. Hopefully that's a program that many of you are already familiar with. That program is about 9 years old now. It's very successful in deploying free charging infrastructure throughout the state of Colorado. And it's focused on communities level 2 as well as DC fast charging stations. Our DC Fast Charging Plazas program is focused on those fast charging stations developed around the state. And then our corridors program is specifically dedicated to our designated major corridors throughout the state of Colorado. Currently, right now, our Charge Ahead grant program is open for applications. So please do take a look at that program if your community is interested in installing community-based level 2 or DC fast charging. You can see here in the chart on the left, this is the way that the program has been run traditionally. If you look at the right, we've made some adjustments and modifications to the program that went into effect with this current open round. You can see that we have added an additional incentive for income qualified candidates, and I'll speak more to that. So those candidates can receive up to $11,500. And that match requirement now for those income qualified applicants, rather than that match piece being 20% of the total project cost, it's 10% of the project cost. We're also offering some additional incentive for disproportionately impacted communities or our DI communities with an additional $1,000. And again, that match of 90% to 10% match. So in order to be eligible for that enhanced disproportionately impacted community $1,000 incentive, there are a number of different ways that different programs and the state is defining what is disproportionately impacted. We want it to be as all encompassing when we were talking about what applicants would qualify for that additional incentive. So there is a definition that we have in Senate Bill 21260. There is a federal definition that's in the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program for disadvantaged communities, and a few other tools that you see here. You don't need to know the details of that. We have a map that's on the Charge Ahead Colorado application page where you can click on that, put in the address for where you want to install that charging infrastructure, and it will tell you based on that location if you meet any of those criteria for a disproportionately impacted community. That incentive is restricted to entities that are serving the community, including libraries, community centers, rec centers, nonprofits, schools, and others. Next slide. This one is talking about then our income qualified incentive. This is very much focused on multifamily housing and serving income qualified tenants. 66% of those tenants would need to be at 80% area median income or less. And looking as well in all of our programs to be able to stack with other incentives, whether those are other state programs, federal incentives, utility programs that are now being made available through Cell Energy, Blackville, some other utilities as well. So you can find more information on the Charge Ahead website. Again, that application did open on October 19th. It is open through November 16th at 5 p.m. We do offer this program 3 times a year in October, January, and May. So if you have an idea for a great program and you're not able to get your application in by November 16th, certainly keep it in mind for January or May of next year. If you do have a multifamily housing or a workplace that is interested in installing charging infrastructure, those are priority areas for us, and we now are accepting those applications on an ongoing rolling basis. We will also be looking to launch the next round of our DC Fast Charging Plazas program in early 2023. That's going to be incorporating the new federal NEVI program, and I'll have some information on the details of that. We're also investing some of our community access enterprise dollars into our Fast Charging Plazas program. We are looking at a gap in this to help us determine where being able to help us prioritize where we're making those investments. This is a program that has a lot of different funding sources in addition to NEVI and the Community Access Enterprise. This is receiving funding from CMAQ and some other programs as well. So we're really excited to be investing as well and ensuring that if you're going on that longer trip through Colorado, you know that you'll have access to a public fast charging station. On e-bikes, there's a lot of really exciting developments at the state level on our e-bike programs. Senate Bill 22-193 that just passed a few months ago, dedicating $12 million in new incentives for e-bikes. We will be offering through the Colorado Energy Office a new point of sale rebate program. This is going to be a program that is eligible for low and moderate income qualified individuals, and we are looking to launch that probably about March or April of 2023. That program is under development, so more information to come on that. We're also using Senate Bill 193 to be able to help us with the full implementation of the Can Do Colorado program. That was a program that was a pilot initially. This had great response and success. So that is going to be available to local governments, to nonprofit organizations, community-based organizations, as well as tribal governments. And we look to have that request for applications opening this month in November. We are also going to be looking to launch a new e-cargo bike commercial delivery pilot program using our community access enterprise funding. That is under development and more details to come, but really looking to serve those sort of first mile, last mile delivery opportunities by e-bikes rather than vehicles. Our Recharge Colorado program, this is a great resource if you have questions about these programs, if you want help with an application to any of these programs. We have dedicated coaches throughout the state of Colorado, and you can see those regions here on the map. They are available to help consumers, local governments, workplaces, multifamily housing operators be able to understand what programs are available for the types of projects that they are envisioning. So really great resource to be able to help you navigate all of these different programs. I'm going to shift just in the last few minutes here to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the IIJA. This was the major piece of federal legislation that was passed by Congress at the end of 2021. It is dedicating $7.5 billion to EV charging throughout the United States. $5 billion of that is in the form of the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, or NEVI program. Colorado is expected to receive $57 million of NEVI program funding over the next 5 years, and the allocation in this year is over $8 million. There will also be $2.5 billion available through competitive grants. We expect to get more information on what that grant program may look like here in the next few months. All of the states were required to develop a TV deployment plan for that NEVI program. Colorado submitted its plan on August 1st, and it was approved on September 14th. So we're really excited to be moving forward with that. The key requirements for NEVI is, again, this overall goal of creating a national charging infrastructure network across the entire United States. So those projects that can qualify for NEVI funds do need to be located within 1 mile of a federally designated corridor. I'll have a map on the next slide to show what those corridors are. There is going to be a prioritization for rural areas and disproportionately impacted communities, as well as charging infrastructure that will support medium and heavy duty freight. The charging locations should be no more than 50 miles apart along those designated corridors, and also have a minimum of 150 kilowatts charging for at least 4 vehicles to be charging simultaneously. We have some of our DC fast charging that doesn't necessarily meet those NEVI requirements, so it is an opportunity for us to increase the number of ports or increase the power that is being provided at some of our existing fast charging sites across the state, as well as installing brand new sites across the state of Colorado. NEVI will consider eligible for support battery storage, renewable generation, and other elements to manage the demand charges and increase the resiliency of these sites. And those NEVI dollars can be used to reimburse operational and maintenance expenses for up to 5 years. This map is a little bit hard to see, but basically our green areas and then the green stations that you see here on this map, these are currently NEVI compliant. So they already have at least those 4 charging ports available at the power load that is required and within 50 miles of another DC fast charger. In the gold or the yellow, you can see where there's upgrades necessary. Maybe there's more power needed at those sites. Maybe there are more plugs that are needed at those sites to be considered NEVI compliant. And then where you see in the red areas, those are our new opportunities because those are gaps that we have in our fast charging infrastructure to make sure, again, that we are having those fast charging opportunities every 50 miles along these designated corridors. So the call to action here, please do sign up for all of those various enterprise emails to stay up to date. There is a lot of new state money that is going into electrification with all of these new programs over the next 10 years. So it's a great way to stay up to date on programs and funding opportunities going forward. Do apply to the Charge Ahead Colorado grant program. Again, it's open through November 16th at 5 o'clock. More to come certainly on our next round of our Fast Charger Plazas program and the NEVI funding opportunities. And then be sure to connect with your recharge coach if you have questions about those programs and how you can apply. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Carrie, and we will wrap it up with Allison, and perhaps we'll have time for Q&A after. Take it away, Allison. So tell us some awesome things the city of Boulder is doing in this area.
Great, thank you, Samantha. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Moore-Farrell, Senior Transportation Planner at the City of Boulder. Thanks so much for joining us today. Carrie and Devin shared terrific things going on at the federal and state level, and I'm going to share how we can bring it to the local level and the municipalities you work for or who you partner with. So I'll be sharing some examples of things we're doing in the city of Boulder and how we're partnering and using some of these grant opportunities and how we see we can use them in the future. So first of all, we're looking at city fleet electrification. So as most cities, we have city fleet vehicles, and we are in the process right now of bringing as many as possible into EVs or plug-in EVs. As you're aware, some city vehicles like snowplows are not able to do that right now. So of course there's some, that we can't do that. So we can't say it's going to be a 100% EV fleet, but we are working towards that so that we can be an example for other cities, for our community, and also other companies that have fleets. Think of large companies like Google, Amazon, these large companies that have fleets and how they can be working on this as well. We're also looking at the procurement of EV charging infrastructure. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about charging infrastructure on another slide, but we were talking about different opportunities for funding for charging infrastructure. And as the city role, what we're looking for is what's the appropriate placement? Let's look at the land uses and how people will be using this, and looking at that gap analysis and looking at the, how people are using it and really how often people are using these charging stations, because maybe they're not appropriately placed and maybe we need to look at other locations or more in one location. So we really see that as a city opportunity to identify that within our own community. Another opportunity we see is the secondary EV support market. So Devin was mentioning that used EVs are now eligible for up to $4,000 in rebate, which is really exciting that it's not just new EVs that are eligible for this. So this creates a whole new secondary EV market that that really hasn't been fleshed out. So we see that as a municipality role of how we can help facilitate that and bring those secondary EV market to others in the community with, whether it's low income folks or who's ever looking for secondary EV market options. So really with all of this funding around electric vehicles, we feel that it's important and a role of the municipality to really provide communications and understanding to our community and other jurisdictions, employers within our community. So all of these items really fall underneath that, and we can kind of be that resource for community members. As a new EV owner myself, I learned so many new things that I had no idea about. I mean, we called the dealership multiple times to kind of understand whether it's charging items, or whether it's so many different things about electric vehicles, that are just a new, that need to be communicated to folks. And there's really that communications piece that's lacking there that we see the municipalities as having an opportunity to fill. Another thing is workforce development. So right now, if you have an EV, if you need maintenance on it, you're taking it to the dealership. There's very few shops that really can do maintenance on EVs. So and that's just one example of new workforce that comes from EVs. So really helping foster that workforce development, working with your chamber on this, working with, BTC, commuting solutions, and working with folks in that community to determine how we can best support that as this grows. Another way we support is the school bus electrification. Right now, Boulder Valley School District is working towards purchasing electric vehicles, and we're providing support with that, with grant opportunities, and providing support opportunities with that. So that's one way with community adoption that we can move forward with that. Another way is micro mobility incentives. So we were talking about at the state level of e-bike rebates, and it's been really successful in Denver. So looking at future opportunities there in other cities. Within the city of Boulder, we've had recent micromobility pilots, and so we're looking at at different ways we can provide opportunities for others in the community, and what that looks like in terms of charging infrastructure and where that can fit within our community. Other options we're looking at are all electric low emission zones. This has been shown in other cities and other parts of the world. We haven't dug in too deep into this, but it's more something that's an option that could be looking at in the future. Something else we're partnering on is rideshare electrification. So as we were mentioning earlier about TMCs and delivery folks, all have their separate goals around electric vehicles. We're working on a curbside management project right now, and we've been working a lot with FedEx and Amazon and Uber and Lyft, and learning about their electric vehicles and seeing how we can kind of match those or dovetail with them to succeed within our community. So again, kind of that support role, but really dovetailing with those goals as well. Something else the city of Boulder is working on charging solutions. And I have a couple different categories right here. Something we're working on right now is the regional fleet charging hub out in East Boulder, and we're working with this is a collaborative effort with the city, the county, via Boulder Valley School District, and Excel. I think I got them all. Anyways, to provide a community charging hub for all of these fleet vehicles. So that's pretty central for all of these uses. So really looking at kind of collaborating here and how we can. We also are looking at multifamily charging infrastructure. Carrie was mentioning that is a priority. So within our development review program at the city of Boulder, we do this for new developments, but what about existing multifamily? So as we go through the development review process, that is a part of the process, and we allow the developers have to include that, and we work with them on what makes sense for the community. But we're also providing opportunities, helping with grant opportunities and others for existing multifamily, because that's often a barrier for folks living in multifamily of being able to plug in your electric vehicle, right? I live in a single family home. I can just plug it in at night. That's a lot more difficult if you're living in a multifamily community and you don't have that option. So really looking at those opportunities, especially within the city of Boulder. It's no surprise that we're growth restricted in the city of Boulder, so that's even more important for us in terms of multifamily and our developments there. We also are providing support for micro-mobility charging infrastructure. Like I mentioned, we had a recent micro-mobility pilot, so we're moving forward with that and considering where it makes the most sense to provide support for those charging infrastructure within the city of Boulder, so that we can be meeting our city goals with these new opportunities at the state and federal level. And then also community charging hubs. So this can look like a variety of different things, whether it's new developments, whether it's commercial development. So providing support there and connecting with federal and state funding resources for that is a role we see for the city. So a call to action, and this is primarily for municipalities or those supporting municipalities. So when you're working with cities, counties, we're kind of sharing this information and what's worked for us, and we're looking at moving forward. So like I mentioned with a few of these, seek appropriate and collaborative funding. I mentioned the charging hub that we're doing in East Boulder with the school district, the county. Work together and find this collaborative funding at the federal and state level, other folks who have those similar goals, so that you can build a larger, infrastructure that could support all of those. Maintain both a future focus and celebrate those short-term successes. So like I mentioned, we've had a recent micromobility project. It was a pilot for a year. Let's celebrate those successes, but how can we move that forward and have that future program that meets our city goals? So kind of recognizing both of those, and then you can keep the community engaged that way as well. And communicate and provide educational materials. So I mentioned this, throughout the presentation, we really see that as a role of the city of making these connections and bringing it to the local level and identifying that funding, connecting it with your community members of where that's needed. All right, thank you so much, and we'll open it up to Q&A.
Yes, thanks so much, Allison, Devin, and Carrie, all of our wonderful panelists. So amazingly, I'm happy to say we have 20 minutes to have a wonderful back and forth. So here's a recap of all the calls to action, which I'll leave up to inspire any questions or comments, but please feel free to voice your questions or comments for our panelists. Please.
This is for Carrie. Often when I talk to property owners about electric vehicle charging stations, I always get this question that pops up about hydrogen. A lot of people are big proponents on that and resistant to investing too heavily in electric. And usually when the conversation gets there, I say, I don't know. Can you help me answer that question?
We are working on hydrogen, in short. The state of Colorado is part of a multi-state collaboration here in the Intermountain West with Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico, looking to pursue federal dollars to support building out a hydrogen hub between the 4 states. So that work is ongoing right now. The acronym, we have to have acronyms. That one is WISH, which I believe is Western Interstates Hydrogen Hub. You can find information about that project on the CO's website. There, I believe it's about $2 billion that's available at the federal level. I think per project, they're looking to fund 4 or 5 of these throughout the United States. And Community Access Enterprise does have the ability to be supporting hydrogen projects. In our 10-year plan, we decided not to start a program on that in the very short near term because we do want to see where this federal funding is going to end up. And if we are able to get one of those federally designated hydrogen hubs here in Intermountain West, then we would consider how we would be bringing potentially additional state resources to that. So with everything we're doing, we're trying to figure out what is the role of the state, how can we be working with our partners at the local level, at the county level, at the federal level, through utilities, through nonprofits. There's so many different partners in this space. So hydrogen is definitely something that we are working on and more to come.
Great, thank you.
It's similarly to Stuart's, when we talk to property managers and developers, they talk about strain on the current, right, to produce energy to charge these vehicles. Are we going to run into the same thing that happened in California where people are buying generators to charge for Teslas by the driveway? The amount of vehicles that are getting registered every year, I think it's 18% now are vehicles or EVs or something crazy. Are we going to have the energy to charge them if that trend continues? What's going to happen?
What do you want to jump in?
I guess it's an energy office question. Probably.
I will say it's a great question. I'm not part of the utility companies and managing the grid, but what I can say on that is that we have a lot of time of use incentives so that we know that about 70 to 80% of folks who have EVs are charging those EVs at home. And you can set your charger to be charging overnight when there is less demand on the grid, and typically when prices are lower as well. So not only is it an efficiency in terms of the demand on the grid, but it's also an efficiency savings in terms of how much you are paying for the electricity to charge your vehicle. So there's a couple of benefits to doing it that way. Again, that is speaking to at-home charging and to folks who have the ability to plug in at home. And so as we think about then other time of use and how we can be incentivizing people to be charging throughout different periods of the day, those are certainly considerations that we need to be keeping in mind. Right now in Colorado, the latest information I just saw from the recent quarterly update from the Colorado Automobile Dealers Association is that through the first 9 months of this year, Colorado has 9.6% market share on electric vehicles, and that places us fifth in the country, which is really exciting. So Colorado is doing really well in terms of its EV adoption, supporting the infrastructure needed for those vehicles. But certainly as we're talking about the increased adoption of light duty vehicles, medium and heavy duty vehicles, school buses, fleets, we always need to be keeping in mind the resources that are needed to support that increased adoption as well. The state of Colorado does have a goal of having 940,000 EVs on our Colorado roads by 2030. We also know that we have significant greenhouse gas emission reduction targets in terms of getting to 80% less greenhouse gas emissions from our electricity portfolio by 2030. So there's a great role with our utility partners in making sure that the electricity that is on the grid is always becoming more sustainable, greener, and winds more prevalent at night as well. So again, another incentive to be charging your EV during the evening hours when you know that the power that's coming from the grid is renewable based. So hopefully that got to some of the question, but certainly ongoing
Certain
discussion.
stakeholders always bring up, because the grid can, under resources.
I think that's a good point you bring up, Terry. You know, I don't know what the capacity is, but looking at those incentives and disincentives within our existing capacities and understanding that in the TDM field, we're very familiar with, you know, carrots and sticks. So that's a great point of how we can.
And also, I would just add, some of the funding that you guys talked about would go towards these grid networks where the energy can be stored. And the project that Allison mentioned, the multiple partner project with via Excel City, County, and BDSD, part of that is going to involve storing energy. So that would be, I think, a great solution moving forward. Make sure we have enough to meet the demand.
So we have a backhoe program in my area in the Farmington Hill. And we are moving everything to hybrid vehicles at this point because it's just not quite working for us for the distances that they drive. And I don't really know what I'm asking this question about, but what we're seeing is a hard time getting vehicles and then the cost of the vehicles. Any of these incentive programs, anything you're working on, any experience, just things that you could share with what works and what doesn't work. Is there any movement on some of the rebates talking about that these things are getting so expensive?
I can speak a little bit to that because I manage the backhoe program for the city of Boulder, and we do have some folks from the North Front Range FPO and then our other places from Dr. Prop Enterprise Van Fuels. And so, you know, if it's a plug-in electric vehicle or other hybrid, that's an option as well. And we've been told there are some vehicles, but we've also been informed kind of the same thing, that there is, you know, kind of back order and it's more difficulty getting those larger hybrids. So we're working with them. We were just kind of starting this a couple months ago of how to identify some of that with our van pools. So I'd be touch base with you after this and see if there's any incentives that we can help work on for that, because there's some difficulties with those larger vehicles in terms of getting those, but also cost.
Yeah, I think the bigger issue really is the cost. I mean, you know, a year and a half to get 10 vehicles. But I'm just curious if there's a cost differential because they're getting more expensive as well, just because they're harder and harder for kids. I don't think that goes toward your program about, is there a consideration of some of these incentives going up because of the cost?
So the current tax credits at the state level are focused on I believe just individual purchases rather than the fleet. So that's where the role now of the new Clean Fleet Enterprise at CDPHE can come in to help incentivize the upfront purchase of those electric vehicles. That will be a new program, so definitely one to keep an eye on. And then in terms of supporting whether it's plug-in hybrid electric vehicles or fully electric vehicles, that's where the community access enterprise can support those fleets, making sure that they have the charging infrastructure needed to support that fleet adoption as well.
So it's possible that the CDOT Innovative Mobility Grant Program might have some electrification stuff. I didn't look at it specifically and get that to align that. Which could fit in the thing.
$80,000 for the.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, sorry, the vehicle. What do you mean?
Oh, okay. So, yeah, so maybe there is some information through the Employee Reduction Act for these purchases that might be helpful.
Yeah, I know that's tough because those vehicles are more expensive than 5-year vehicle. Yeah.
Can I ask a devil's advocate question from a TDM perspective? How do we market EV sales and reduce SOV at the same time?
We ask that all the time.
Everyone knows the question. I'm just curious.
I'll start with that one because that's honestly a conversation all the time. I'm working right now in the City of Boulder plan, and that is something we circle back to all the time. And I think it's something that needs to be more part of the conversation. You know, electric vehicles are super sexy and awesome, but your increase, it's shown that increases GHG, that increases SOV. Yeah, lower GHG emissions. But you're increased, you know, so there's multiple sides to the coin, right? So I think I agree with you. It needs to be more part of the conversation. And I think that it needs to not just be about cars, right? So we need to be looking at more at vehicles. We need to be looking at e-bikes, scooters, and other e-options, right? And not just thinking a Tesla or something. So having that be more part of the conversation and more kind of visual. So, you know, whether that's micro-mobility in more downtown areas or having that more of a part of the conversation. Because yeah, that is, so I think we can't ignore other TDM initiatives and TDM strategies, right? Just because there is this and there's benefits, but there's also downsides to it, right? And so we have to keep in mind that it's not just all positive. And we have to understand those trade-offs. So I guess my answer was it needs to be more part of the conversation for all communities and understanding that it's not this silver bullet solution, right? It's like with anything with TDM, you have these smaller, 1%, 2% solutions, right, that build upon each other. And that's kind of how I see these EVs in our community. And so that just needs to be the understanding. It's a silver bullet answer.
And I could just add to that, yeah, from the TML perspective, our way we would couch it is, let's talk about EcoPass, let's talk about vanpool, let's talk about EcoPass, walking, biking, then vanpool, carpool, and then at the very final end of the conversation, if you are going to buy a car, let's talk EV. I think it's how you frame it. And I think, for instance, like if we're going to have an EV ride and drive, which is really fun for a lot of people and brings a lot of people in, let's have also at that event information about EcoPass, walking, biking, e-micromobility as well. And I'd also add to that, I ran a e-bike and e-scooter micromobility share program up in Fort Collins previously. And there's also a conversation similarly happening there because some of the results find that people are not replacing car trips with e-bike and e-scooter trips. They're replacing transit or walking trips. Yes. So yeah, you want to make sure that, so a solution there would be put baskets or onto those bikes or make them cargo bikes so that people can go shopping with them. So you just also can look at it from the perspective, okay, well, how do we make people, from the e-micromobility share perspective, think of these not just as a fun way to get downtown or get back from the bar, but instead use them for, longer trips. So that's another way to look at it. Any other questions? Comments? Expressions of emotion?
I guess it's just a conversation starter and somewhat of a question regarding funding and grants. One thing that we saw in a building who was interested in getting or installing an EV charger was the building itself was out of code and the cost to upgrade
the electric system just completely took out that opportunity for the users or the folks in that building. And it's a big, it's a big employer hub in that there's a school co-located, different 11 nonprofit partners and some other small businesses. And I'm just wondering if grant funding would be available to help with those upgrades, because I feel like most of the time it's geared towards the purchase and installation of the charging station. But there's so much that goes into installing one. I don't know if you've seen this anywhere else, if anybody else is running into that, but I know it's something that we've run into in our community.
We haven't seen that specific, or I'm not aware that we've seen that specifically in Boulder. I'm sure we have. But what I would recommend there is kind of how we were all mentioning earlier, is building upon different forms of funding. So sure, it may not be a specific state or federal resource that we were just talking about, but there could be other ones that you could build upon, to meet those needs and make that cost lower. So I know that, that's a significant priority in a lot of development. So kind of building on those, multiple opportunities could kind of reduce that cost. But I don't have a specific example that we've seen.
And I think that's a city code issue. I don't know if you're working on this, Emily, in my absence, but the city of Fort Collins, they were updating the city code to figure out how to require new developments and existing developments to comply with EV charger installation requirements. And that was the main complaint. What if I have to upgrade this huge piece of infrastructure? Now, what is it, an extra tens of thousands of dollars? That's ridiculous. So there's a lot of pushback from the building manager and developer community, of course. I wonder if a solution would be the municipality creating a fund, maybe using some of this federal and state funding to sort of mitigate those costs, so that if we're requiring a code, we also can provide you with financial assistance, make it not a terrible nightmare situation.
Be interesting at 1026 to do that, right?
That's a great idea. Yeah.
I mean, as a property manager, if it's a sustainable load, right? Up to 250,000 to retrofit their existing old product.
Well, 1026 would just apply to employers.
So that would be the argument, right? Could a property manager apply to a property that would benefit all the employers in it?
Yeah.
Or the employers fund it for that property.
That's a great idea.
Get flexible. But
Get
it has to be
creative
like-
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To my understanding of 1026, it would be individually, like employers have so that they can have their employees register, but that would be interesting to figure out if that is something that.
We have to try to get creative somehow, take advantage.
And they're still in the middle of rulemaking, probably until at least mid next year, right? So
yeah,
we could lobby for that. Advocate for that. Good idea.
I'm joined today by two colleagues, Elena McCall and Max Gessen. Elena is with CDOT's Community Traffic Safety Grants program, or she's the grant manager. And she's going to talk a little bit about what grants are coming up in the next fiscal year, and a lot of things that y'all should be keeping on your radar if you're into this world like we are. You all are. And then Max Gessen is going to talk specifically about a program that the partnership took on with some community partners to do some bike safety analysis. Pretty exciting project. We unfortunately, Lauren Nagel, who's going to join us to talk through some of their outreach programs in the city of Fort Collins, she wasn't able to join this morning. So, and good to feel good at home. So these days. So anyway, without further ado, I think Elena.
So this one is a little awkward, so I think I might sit so you can still see the screen as I talk, and then I can still click as I go, if that's okay. So I work here at CDOT. I work in the Highway Safety Office within the Office of Transportation Safety, but we call ourselves the Highway Safety Office. And I'm going to talk about opportunities we have in federal fiscal year 2024 through our grants here. They're behavioral health grants. So a little bit of background on our office. So we develop and implement programs through grants
that are through NHTSA. So NHTSA is the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. All of our grant funding and Highway Safety Office is coming through NHTSA. And then really the goal of our office is we want to reduce serious bodily injury and fatal crashes across Colorado. So all of our funding through NHTSA comes through different legislation. As we were in 2023 under the FAST Act, Fixing America's Surface Transportation. Now we're transitioning into the new transportation bill that was passed, I think last year or maybe the year before. So you've probably heard it by two different names: the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill or Infrastructure Law called Bill. We're kind of using both right now for both NHTSA. We're using them interchangeably, but basically it's how we're able to fund out to grantees, and kind of it goes through all the requirements that we have to follow as we're managing our grants at CDOT. So if I don't know if you all know, so the federal fiscal year grant cycle runs October 1st to September 30th every year. And I'll have a timeline a little bit later on, but that's kind of the way it runs. So like right now we're in our federal fiscal year 23, and then we're still calendar year 2022. Our 2023 ends in September of next year, and then we start the new cycle on October 1st. So I'm going to kind of go more into some of the new expansion for non-motorized road users in the new bill. There are other expansions within the bill, but overall, I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like for us. So they've expanded the definition of what a non-motorized road user is to be able for us to expand our funding out. They've also given us more funding than we've had in the past. And so through all of our programs, not just non-motorized road user, we have about $9 million that's going to be available next year. So it's a lot of money, and we want to give it out to great programs. So there's a lot of words on this slide, but basically we're looking at for non-motorized road users, looking at pedestrians, we're looking at bicycles, scooters, personal conveyance, or a low horse-powered motorized vehicle such as electric bike and electric scooter. So when I say non-motorized road user, that's pretty much what we're talking about. There's a little bit more expanded definition from NHTSA, but that's the majority of kind of what we see. And then I wanted to write in some eligible uses of funds and how we could use the funding. In the FAST Act, we could use this line of funding still for training of law enforcement, for campaigns, mobilizations, for enforcement of state traffic laws. But this has actually expanded what we can do with the funding. So we can use the funding for non-motorized educational campaigns, awareness campaigns, safety equipment, security equipment. So, lighting for someone crossing, like pedestrian crossing the street, reflection, those are things that were not in the previous act. So NHTSA is starting to realize, hey, we need to expand to include more people because death rate in Colorado is bad on our roadways. And so we need to have more change in what we're doing to make more significant reduction of death and serious bodily injury. So we, through our grant process, it's a bit of an arduous process. We do require a lot of our grantees. You have to address one of our key performance metrics, and I actually have a list in another slide, so you can actually see what that would look like. This link here is the link where we're going to actually post our applications when they're open. So this is where we're going to post everything for our requested applications when they open in late winter. So they're going to open in February, and that's going to be the link. We are currently funding on a 3-year cycle. So someone that applies for 2024 is really going to be applying for 2024, 2025, and 2026. The first year is really when we're doing more of, we're scoring everything, we're reviewing, we're really, choosing, can you do the work, yes or no? And then in the subsequent years, we do have renewal application, but the process isn't as, you're not going to get denied in a year when you've already been accepted the first year unless, you're not spending your funding at all, or you have issues with being able to do the project at all. So some of our requirements, so we really are data driven in our efforts. You know, that's really what NHTSA wants to see. They want to see what is your baseline? What are you trying to do? If you have a grantee, for example, let's say you're in Gunnison County and you're trying to reduce impaired driving. And so maybe you're saying, you know, we have 30 impaired driving deaths a year. We want to reduce that by 5% over the course of 3 years. Or, you know, maybe they think that's more of an ambitious goal, and our goal is really to reduce serious bodily injury, which, you know, you have a higher number of serious bodily injuries than deaths, and so you might be able to make more of an impact. We know that smaller organizations, smaller counties, you know, alone, they might not be able to make that huge jumping impact, but they might be the only resource in their whole county for young driver education, impaired driving education, substance use, anything that's affecting people's decision to get in the car and drive while impaired, while distracted, speed, all of those things put together. And so a lot of times we ask anyone applying to, you know, pick a target population. Are you going to be looking at 18 to 34-year-olds, 25 to 34, 15 to 17? What's your target demographic? And really focus on that group if you're going to change behavior. And again, all of our grants through NHTSA are behavioral based, so we're not doing any infrastructure work with our team. We're doing education, outreach, enforcement, but not infrastructure. But this would be a really great way to pair with the infrastructure grant. So if we have an infrastructure grant, it's looking at putting in roads or a bike lane or some kind of pedestrian infrastructure. We need education. We can fund the education portion of that work. So here are our emphasis area. It's kind of small because there's a lot of them. This is half of them, but really, you know, our grantees usually choose, some of them choose like 1 to 2 of these. So maybe they're looking at practice involving impaired, unrestrained passengers. We have a lot of child passenger safety grants. Maybe they're looking at speed-related fatalities. You know, Denver is like the #1 county for speed fatalities. And so we have a lot of grants addressing speed in Denver. You're looking at Weld County. There's a lot of impaired driving, same thing with El Paso County. And so they kind of choose things for them. This is kind of the other side. You know, we look at older driver fatalities, distracted, like pedestrians, younger driver, unhelmeted, marijuana related. And so this is kind of the different factors that, you know, our grantees choose, and then that's their main goal over the course of those 3 years. And here's our general timeline. It's very basic, but our applications are opening February 3rd on the website that I had. They're going to close on March 17th, and then the grant start date for that grant is going to be next October 1st. You know, there's a lot in the middle of, you know, reviewing and accepting, but these are the basic timelines to think about if you're interested in applying for some grant. And then this is my contact information, and then Carol Gold is our highway safety office manager. She's been here for many years, so she has more expertise than I do if you have specific questions, but that's the question.
Thank you. That's great.
Maybe since we have a little bit of extra time, maybe if there are some questions, we'll do just like quick rapid fire questions for 5 minutes, something like that, since I'm sure there's some questions. I had one about a match. Do these grants typically require a match?
They do, but we don't require project specific. We spool it up at the state level, so we use other state funds to match the federal, so the locals are not burdened with that match requirement. It is 20%.
Anyone else have a question? In some of the other categories of infrastructure, we've actually had to turn that to the state, just because of complications or building a crosswalk in an urban section shouldn't need an endangered species query. Have you had people turn that on?
Yeah, historically, especially with COVID, we found a lot of local public health types of entities, school groups, people that go out and train our young drivers. So with the COVID pandemic, on average, pre-COVID, we were reverting 11 to 12% of our funding. It hit as high as 25% in the past 2 years. But the federal government, NHTSA, does allow us to roll those funds. So the entities revert the money back to us, and then we just add that to our next federal fiscal year. And they allow 4 years plus 1 for us to spend any given fiscal year. It's very nice. It makes it,
That's impressive.
it makes it a lot easier to, yeah, it makes it a lot easier to keep the funding.
So,
Some of the programs we have too, like right now, that are kind of related to TDM. We have a program through Parks and Rec, which is a summer break program for kids and adults that's free. That's funded through our grants. We also fund the City of Denver's Vision Zero program is funded through us as well.
And we work quite a bit too with some of the pedestrian enforcement grants. The police departments will accept our funds, but instead of just ticketing somebody for a pedestrian violation, we'll give a warning and then education. So, you know, here's the pedestrian laws or bike safety laws, and we do that with drivers and being non-motorized roadways.
You're thinking when I like to apply for funding, the answer is yes.
Absolutely. And if you were looking for a reason to apply for funding, we're about to give it to you here. And I'm actually going to start off this presentation with a little bit of a story, and then I'm going to probably next to talk about the real part of this project. Meet Jeanne. This is full disclosure. This is my wife, and she's a great person. She loves to ride a bicycle. This is us in London as before we headed off through Kensington Park. She understands how to bike through a city. She understands how to navigate you know, complex situations in urban environments. We ride bikes a lot together. If we had to do a quick little kind of TDM analysis of Jeanne, you know, we'd probably look at her occupation. We find out she's an elementary school nurse. We find out that she has a pretty short one-way commute distance. She is between 35 and 45 years old.
She knows you have that.
It's a bracket. And her commute mode right now to work is driving. This goes at home, but as I mentioned, she's familiar with how to bike, and so why wouldn't it make sense for her? She has a very short commute distance, a couple days a week, right? Let's just try it out a couple days. Showing you that she enjoys biking. You can see on her face in this photo in particular, she likes to bike with our family, but she's not always the most comfortable roadway user. You can see I'm gleaming here in the front foreground about my family biking behind me, and my 11-year-old is super excited. But Jen's face, you can tell there's just a little bit of discomfort there. She's really happy to help me and our family encourage our kids to get on bikes, which is great. They bike. This was their first day of school, so they're very interested to bike to school. So this is Jen's commute. Again, fairly short, 1 3/4 miles, starting on the green on the far right side to just near South High School, over to McKinley Thatcher. We're lucky to live in a neighborhood with really great bike connections. A lot of this is on Louisiana, which is a fairly big, a fairly busy street. It's not it doesn't have dedicated bike facilities. It's a share-o, but with Wash Park there, fairly low interactions with vehicles typically. This location right here is really of interest, and I wanted to point this out before we begin this presentation. So on Bike to School Day, I said, Jen, you know what? You've got a great opportunity to set an example here for your students. They don't typically get to bike around, and or they don't have a huge bike commute or school mode split there. Like let's show your kids how to do this. So I said, Jen, let's, I waved goodbye to her this morning, and she had her veneers on, and she looked so excited leaving that morning. And this location in particular, this is on Louisiana, if you're familiar about Denver. This is where you're starting to go down a fairly significant grade. You're starting to pick up speed, and there are some neighborhood streets that pile onto this location. And about 10 minutes after she left for her commute, I got a call from her, and I'm like trying to hold back my emotions here. She was really, really upset. She had had a near miss. She'd actually come into collision with a car at this location. The car had pulled out in front of her. She was headed down the hill. She was doing what she was supposed to do. She was taking the lane, and the car just didn't see her, and it went to make a left-hand turn in front of her out from this side street on Corona in front of her. And she was really shook up. It was a really tough moment for her. And being a staunch bike advocate, it just put me like back in my place, right? Here I am out on the street every single day telling people they need to get out on the bike. It's better for them, it's better for the city, it's better for everybody. But when people have interactions like this out on their daily trips, especially when they're just trying it once, it's really tough. If we look at the speed data at that location, we can see that the speed's heading down the hill. So from right to left in this photo, they pick up as you get down the hill. So these are cycling speeds. Obviously, the cycling speeds going up the hill are much slower. So you can see that red indicated there. And you can see that cycling brake intensity isn't actually too bad. So Max is going to talk a lot more about what this means in a second, but look at that spot right at Corona. What if we could look at this location where Jen had that interaction and say, gosh, there's something weird about that. People are going fast fairly consistently on this section, but then when they get to Corona, there's this little blip on the radar. So what I'm hoping that you'll pick up out of this presentation is that we have data available to us today to help maybe even prevent these types of interactions from happening. And we're excited to showcase it. So with that, and we'll try to make that transition smoother. Just for the show. Everything I'm going to get back to. There we go. Yeah. Jen's fine, by the way. She still likes things. But not everybody is so. All right, with that.
Hi, everybody. No, that's good. That's perfect. That's a good segue. No, that does provide a good introduction to what I'm talking about now. So, hi, everybody. I'm Max Gaston. I'm the mobility specialist at the Partnership. And we're going to discuss with you today our 1-year CSANS pilot that we conducted. So continuing what Andrew was just talking about, it's really important to look at bicycle safety as we continue building out all of these different bikeways in Denver. Both the mayor and the city and county of Denver have committed to building out more bikeways, especially as part of the community transportation network. We've seen a lot of those new bikeways downtown. Also, with right now, when we're looking at data that's collected, the only data that is collected right now is serious or fatal accidents that occur. And that's stuff that DPD collects right now, but you don't really get that near miss or that swerving or braking data. And that inhibits people from choosing to bike. According to Denver Moves, 60% of Denverites are interested but concerned to bike around Denver. So there is sort of a lack of what's wrong with our bike networks right now and what are ways that we can improve them in the future to make them more comfortable for people who like to continue biking and adopt biking in the future. So here's that graph. And as we can see too, according to the city and county of Denver, just this year alone or last year, there were four bike fatalities and 23 serious accidents. But there's not a whole lot of data out there that can objectively capture what is going on in the roadways, which means that really the only thing that's going to improve the bikeways right now or inform future bikeways is when something fatal or serious has already occurred. So because of that, we partnered with the City and County of Denver, Gates Foundation or Corporation, and CSense, which is a bike accessory tech company from Great Britain to look at what bicycle behavior is right now to improve ridership and experience moving forward. So just to explain our project a little bit more, this was a one-year pilot. It began in April 2021 and completed in April 2022. We had about 180 active cyclists who completed over 6,300 rides, and we collected nearly 1 billion data points. So we have a ton of data. Also, another component of our study that was really important to us was to get an accurate representation of who's biking in and around the downtown area. So it was important for us to have women represented in the study. 50% of our cyclists were women, and minorities as well. And these are two groups that are often underrepresented when it comes to capturing bicycle data. So the way that the bike works, the bike lights work, they're rear-mounted bike lights that generate highly granular sensor data that's collected through a companion app that you activate prior to each ride. So all of this sensor data is passively collected, which removes the perception bias of the user. But users are still able to supplement their rides with both. Also, the way that the app works is that it profiles each individual rider and creates this distribution. So it knows this normal range of values for each rider. And so then when you deviate from your normal range, that's when it captures intense swerving or braking. So the bike light really gets to learn how you are as an individual bicyclist. And through this data, we're able to collect our swerving, braking data, road roughness, collisions with that qualitative data, movements, where people are riding in the bike lanes, if they're going the wrong way or whatever, their speed, dwell times, and they're able to add more of that qualitative data component too. So this is what our dashboard looks like after each ride. We have that data populate this dashboard, and we're able to collect all of those safety metrics on the left. But we're also looking at time of day, age group, some gender demographics, and the type of bikes that people are riding as well. And these are just the most popular routes. This isn't every single route that our riders rode during that one-year pilot. I think we needed at least 3 riders to make one of these, to populate with these red points. And the darker routes are ones that are the most popular around town. So we've been able to collect that for braking. And again, the darker colors are where people are braking more intensely. Swerving. We can look at road surface. So those red data points are rough areas in the road, in the bikeways and road network. And then all of the perception data, and it's overlaid with a collision data from DVT as well. So there were a lot of areas of interest that we were looking at specifically for this project, and we had a few findings that we really wanted to highlight. One of them is routing, seeing where cyclists bike, despite there being different levels of bike infrastructure. We wanted to look at experiences before and after infrastructure was installed. And we also wanted to look at demographics and the way that, different people might use the bikeways, just to be intentional with, who we are designing these bikeways for and making sure that they're built for everybody. So one of the areas of interest that we highlighted was 11th and 12th Avenue between Cheeseman Park and Spear. And this was so interesting to us because if you look at 11th and 12th Avenue, it looks like ridership is pretty equal, but the bike infrastructure that's currently in place is pretty different. If you're looking at 12th Avenue, there's a shared lane with traffic, shared bike lane that goes from Spear all the way to Lincoln. And on 11th Avenue, there's a designated cycle lane that goes from Spear all the way to Emerson. But that doesn't really make a difference in the way that people choose their route. But when you look at intense braking, 12th Avenue is 2.5 times more intense than 11th Avenue. And you can see that kind of matches up with the bike infrastructure that's located below. But also, if you know 12th Avenue, you know that bikers aren't only with cars, but they're also with buses from Cheeseman Park all the way to Lincoln. So that might cause some of that heavy braking as well. And here's some of that qualitative data that people are able to add to 11th and 12th Avenue, and some of the comments that they've left, cars obstructing bike lanes or not enough street signage. And as we look at swerving, it's almost the same thing. Swerving is 1.5 times more frequent on 12th Avenue than 11th Avenue. And you can see road surface was a lot more rough on 12th than 11th, although that has been repaid since we've taken this screenshot. Well done. Also looking at the way that men and women use the bikeways, it's very different. You can see on that top graph that men use 11th and 12th Avenue pretty much the same amount, whereas female cyclists are really concentrated on that 11th Avenue designated cycle lane, and they connect through Cheeseman Park via Emerson, where that designated cycle lane ends. So this is where it becomes really important to be intentional with the way that you design facilities and to know how different people ride. Another really interesting corridor that we focused on was West 13th Avenue from Platte to Mariposa, pretty close to here. We were really fortunate with this bikeway installation because it happened halfway through our study. So we were able to capture what ridership behavior was like prior to infrastructure being installed and after. So we can see before October 23rd, when it was installed, there was quite a bit of braking. Also, this screen grab on the bottom was taken just a couple months after it was installed, so we don't have the ridership that's up there. But early indications do show that bicyclists are using the route for longer distances than they did before. 3 miles per cyclist compared to 2.3 cyclists before. And the route is a lot more linear. People aren't deviating towards other routes and other roads too. You can also look at what the infrastructure did as far as braking and swerving. Swerving, early indications show that swerving has gone down quite a bit. And that's the same with braking as well. Speed is also increased along the corridor. And something that's really interesting to look at is this road surface too. Road surface has improved with the new bikeways, but you can see that around these railroad crossings, you still have a really rough road surface. And that's the same with these swerving and braking areas. You can see that they're much higher in areas where you're crossing on the railroad. So these are some of the more problematic braking areas around downtown. And we can see how that lines up with closed passes that are reported in CSense and collisions that are reported by DPD. Where there are areas with harsh braking, usually a collision or some sort of accident occurs in some cases. And it's the same thing with swerving. Areas with high concentrations of swerving show that there's a lot of collisions near passes as well. So looking towards next steps, right now we're working on a final report, so it should be able to summarize everything I said today and hopefully give you guys a little bit more as far as findings and recommendations go. We're also looking at potential partnerships with academic institutions to really dive into the data and analyze it a lot further than we have the capacity to do. And also potential long-term continuation of the program, looking at ways to move forward from the pilot phase and really install this as a viable way to measure how cyclists are using road infrastructure and to inform on future improvements in the bikeways. And with that, just want to thank you all for your time. Any questions?
Well, it's really cool. It's really exciting. I'm curious, how did you recruit the participants, and was it hard to get them to participate?
Yeah, and Andrew can probably talk to this more, but there was a survey that participants had to fill out, and so
that's where we were able to get that demographic data, but also see different levels and where we're at with ridership, and so that we can get a real, cross cut of who is using public infrastructure downtown.
The short answer to that is yes. It was hard. Unfortunately, we were awarded the sponsorship for this program from Gates in April of 2020. And then, had to work through recruiting these cyclists for quite some time. We had about 1,000 people take the application. We selected 300 of those, and then as you can see, we had about 180 that were actually actively using it. And we were very picky with how we selected the sample. We really did want to get that cross representation. We looked at people that were comfortable. We tried to get the interested but concerned, but also the people that didn't want to ride very much at all. But we knew we needed a lot of data, so we needed people that still rode a little bit, often. So yeah, we were very choosy, and that made it harder to get that sample bigger, but I think it's probably a little bit easier now. I mean, when we were giving the lights out, people weren't sure they wanted to come into the contact with each other. So yeah.
Did you give the lights out or, okay,
We did.
so,
We did,
and what's
yeah.
the investment of lights like that?
It's about a $50 light. And so that's where that sponsorship came in from Gates. It was a $35,000 grant that we got. That also paid for time with C-Sense to do the analysis and to provide the dashboard, keep that going. But then it also bought 300 lights. Yeah, we talked a lot about whether or not they recommended that we actually have people pay a little bit for the lights, just to create a little bit of that buy-in. They've done that in the UK in a couple of projects, and that helped. We really wanted to try to make this as open and equitable as possible, and just removing costs just seemed to help.
The 600 studies in other communities that just said that they do things in the UK.
Yeah, they've had a few in the UK.
They have any other?
Yeah, they while we launched ours, they launched a 1,000-light program in Melbourne. We're the only city in the US that had this light.
First off, thank you for not doing another mammal study, middle-aged men in micro. But secondly, because you have this great participants in those categories, have you been able to obtain anecdotal information to inform Doty's team and others that kind of keep the ball rolling but grow and get beyond mammals?
Yes, you want to have. Okay, yeah. The Doty, they.
I don't know. I left.
They.
I'm quick to figure it out.
They're still using fairly traditional methods for doing outreach around their programs. And one of the things we really wanted to show them was that you don't always have to do it that way. You can build in something like this and do your outreach around a project this way. You're collecting passive data instead of putting a map out on the table and having people slap stickies on it. Which there's a lot of bias in those responses. And we really saw this as a way to remove that bias and control your sample in a much more thoughtful way.
Because we're using Strava, but Strava is just mammal.
It
So, I mean, it helps a little bit, but it gives no sense of community.
Right. And it typically just measures volume, whereas this was getting at, and we should mention too, Max had to trim. This is a very extensive analysis to this, and we had to keep it short because we had a short time frame initially. The way that these data are collected, it's not just every time you brake, you get a darker light. It actually looks at the rider's profile and how often you brake and how hard you brake, and it actually adjusts the curve to your typical riding style. So if you're someone that's slapping the bike around and really slamming hard on the streets, that your curve, you won't see us ping unless you're really slapping on the brakes and really jerking the bike around.
Yeah, and another difference between this data and Strava too is, I think Strava, it links back to a road, no matter where it snaps back. Whereas this takes data points exactly where you're riding, so you're able to see, those little nuances of the network.
Gosh, this is such a resource for anything you want to do, invest in on, build ideas, because no one has this.
I bet.
I bet you
So
could
would
do.
love to fund it.
I bet they could.
And what's the cost per unit? on the
Sorry?
lights? What's the cost per unit on the lights?
About $50 on the market, like if you bought one off, off their website or something. And they have much higher ends, they're actually, it's funny, their demographic that they sell to in the UK is typically road cyclists. And they're looking at a lot of recreational safety issues out there for road cyclists. But yeah, they gave us, you get a little discount when you buy them in bulk.
Andrew, and Max, did you see any other, you talked about, males and females, but did you see any other demographic trends that you noticed in terms of riding behavior and things like that?
We mostly focused on male and female ridership.
And we couldn't show the data based on race. They were very specific about the things that they wanted. They wanted to keep it really anonymous, and I agree with that. We really wanted to be careful about, if we only have a sample of 170 people, it would be pretty easy to start picking up individuals in certain locations. I think it would be easy if you started to really hone in on where these riders are coming from. And two, I think that's one of the limitations, is just trying to keep it anonymous. Maybe if you could get people to agree, I'd be like, okay, I'll be part of
they
this
get
and
opted
show-
into it.
Yeah.
Only because I do know, that, the other studies that have been done about that different people with different, backgrounds ride differently. So I think it's really important to think about in terms of moving forward.
Yeah.
And our infrastructure design.
Yeah, and we tried to just say, look, if we select a sample where we have 50% non-white women, we know that they're active in the sample, they're in there,
And are people still using them, and are you still collecting data?
Actually, yeah,
That's
we
what
get,
it's
yeah. They're their lights, so.
You said we could sort of people are not using the road, they're using different things. Like, do you have a map to highlight when people, where they're using the sidewalk instead of the road because they feel not on the sidewalk in those areas?
I wish that we could get some sort of aerial view so we can really dive deeper and see where that is. It's a little bit tougher with this map that they have, but I assume if you just changed it to an aerial, you'd be able to see those.
There are some places like on Spear, along Tree Creek, where it's pretty obvious.
Oh, yeah.
They're not, the sidewalk is way away from the bike route, where it's the road, it's a little bit, it's pretty close, pretty tight to see those.
Yeah, same with 20th cut ballpark. People that are not riding with fast traffic with the cars, but on the elevated.
You can get directionality though, so you can see when people are going wrong and way as the bike. Yep.
Just two questions. Do you have vehicular traffic counts on 11th and 12th to see if there were more vehicles? I'd be interested to see an overall on that to see because I was a 12th user, but apparently I fit the demographic. And that's fine. I used 12. And from an economic development perspective, I would be interested to see if there is additional data, like dwell data on, even if it's broken down by demographic, how many stops these users might have made at coffee shops. And we can make an economic case to say, build out your cycling infrastructure because the average rider stops 1 point, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. No, blah, blah, blah.
Well, it'd be interesting too, because when I was there, 12 was identified as a favorite bike lane, which would restrict the use of bike lanes because of the width of the roadway, and they were just doing free parking. If you see me in your neighborhood, I would probably be taking away your. So, but that was like a position they took at that time. But to your point, the commercial uses, the fun is on 12, it's just, there's a ton of friction. Yeah.
You'd probably have to, just to keep it anonymous, you'd probably have to create something where it just focuses on those commercial corridors, so you aren't seeing where people are going into maybe their homes or something like that.
Yeah, and then you could say, oh, these people slow down more during this, in this commercial area. Are they looking at businesses? Did they stop?
No, I love that. We do have dwell time, but to Max's point, it doesn't show like certain time that it cuts off just to avoid getting someone.
Cool, that's it, yeah. Those are my 2 questions.
Really interesting.
The road surface data available for road improvement was been shared with streets or however.
Nobody got it.
Not yet, it's spike data.
Yeah.
I'm looking at that, I'm going, my God, they're on, oh no, it's Cherry Creek.
It feels like with this kind of data like that, that one slide that had like 6 different locations where people were like stopping short, braking all the time. Like these are routes that I bike on regularly, but yeah, this one, like I could tell you my situation at every single one of these. And so I feel like with this kind of data, we don't have to speak as loud as we yelling to make changes because the data shows it. And so I feel like it could save all of us some heartache in trying to get a point across, and the data just says these are problems. And so for me as a cyclist here for the last 8 years, I just makes me so happy.
Yeah, they did in Broome, okay, they actually did a statistical correlation with their data and where those crashes are happening, and they determined that they could actually predict where fatal and serious injury crashes are happening just using.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask about, like after you all stop the program, people that still have the lights and the data is being, I assume, collected still by CSense. If the program already was picked up later, you can still look at that. It's not like. Cool.
You've been watching it for quite some time, right, Adam?
Yeah. It's 35K.
4 years.
Yeah.
Pennies.
And like the Strava data that you get from Strava Metro, I mean, it's 12.5% penetration. And a lot of it, yeah, certainly is mammals, but it does help inform
It
some.
does help. It is useful.
But this is a real experience.
Yes, this is, we do a lot more work. It's colored one.
All right, get your checkbooks out, everyone.
I was gonna say, I have that light and actually lost it, and I bought it again, and I connected again to the study because I think it's so cool, like to see how you can contribute yourself to the system, right? Is Dottie using this data at all? Like, did you mention that? Like, are you thinking of using this like for making some improvements or like just for locations where they have like swerving or a lot of braking?
They're still building a case. I think they're very, very skeptical of new data sources, and trying to work around some of these issues. Dan was just talking about parking removals. They have their, we very intentionally focused on people that were in those transportation neighborhood transportation areas. And so as those things are being rolled out, they're asking for some of these data, but haven't gotten full commitment yet, which is interesting. It takes a lot. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is there a way of like knowing my data? Like knowing how I travel? I'm curious.
Are you expecting a little way to go on your phone?
I mean, it gives you like miles traveled and stuff, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But not a map.
You're right.
You want to know where you're braking.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, where? Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Now that a bunch of these lights are deployed, like what would the cost be for Dottie essentially to get control of the dashboard?
I think it's $10K for another year of dashboard access. still have access. Yeah,
Mhm.
they aren't turning it off, so
Yeah.
it's still available. But yeah, to kind of like pick up, so they'll keep
Mhm.
providing analysis. I mean, with almost 1 billion points of data, it's really hard to extract data from it without going to them and saying, hey, can you send us this clip and can you know, run the stats on these things? So there's still a little bit of interaction that's necessary with them. I mean, it's crazy. They're a little startup in Belfast that's just sort of leaned into this technology, woman owned, which is really cool, and they're growing a lot based on that. But you know, them being in the UK, I think Dottie hasn't been like super quick to be, you know, like, oh, let's jump into this all the way. But hopefully with this report, more of these kind of things, we can build a case for it here. Get a couple more cities to try it out.
Yeah. Would you think the same kind of data is where we just use pedestrians, well, seeing more people in active?
Can you fashionably incorporate a brake light?
Put it in your shoe like the Nike trackers.
That's it. Yeah.
Braking.
Yeah.
Funny people always have stuff. It's just like, it's such a different, yeah. I know, there are. There are, if you could figure out the correlation between bike fatalities and pedestrian fatalities, then this maybe has to do with something. All right, we can stop there before we break down. Unless someone has another question. Thank you so much for your time.